Welcome everybody to another Sunday of When Black Women Gather. We are here this Sunday to talk about mending the divide between Black women and Black men, and we are honored to have Dr. Cleo Manago, who's going to lead us in this conversation. Cleo has been with us several times before, and those of you who know him, you know we're in for a treat. So we have Black men and Black women on this call, and the intent is that we engage Dr. Cleo in his conversation, and he will direct us as to how that will happen. So for right now, for those of you who don't know, I always forget to introduce myself, just assuming people know who I am. I am Helen Higginbotham. I am the founder of When Black Women Gather, and it is an organization for Black women to come together in a safe space of our own. And every now and then we have the pleasure of inviting our brothers to join in our circle with us. And today would be one of those days. So I am going to read you a quick bio for Dr. Manago, and then he will take it from there. So Cleo, thank you again for always coming through whenever I ask. I really appreciate it. So I'll let you talk in 2 seconds. But we can hear you. Okay, so real quick, Cleo Manago is a behavioral health specialist and cultural anthropologist. He is also a writer and educator, a popular speaker, and Black/African social justice and defense-focused human rights activist. Since 1988, he has founded two often emulated organizations, including the Amasi Centers for Black Wellness and Culture, where he is CEO, excuse me, and Black Men's Exchange National, where he is, okay, somebody needs a mute, okay, where he is chief advisor. He will share with us today some new and exciting work that he is embarking on. And I can't wait for you all to hear about it. Dr. Manago is also a developer of the critically noted critical thinking and cultural affirmation methodology, a racism, oppression, trauma, trans-breaking behavioral intervention. In 2015, the framework and theory was included in the CDC Center for Disease Control and Prevention's compendium of evidence-based interventions. He is uniquely thoughtful. His uniquely thoughtful perspectives, innovations, and examinations of Black self-conceptual health and reparative behavior change have been featured in numerous journals, including the Black Scholar, Journal of Black Studies and Research, the Journal of Black Psychology, American Journal of Public Health. Dr. Manago has been featured on mainstream and alternative media to include BET, TV1, Fox News, C-SPAN, ABC, NBC, PBS, CBS, and I'm sure many of you remember him from his ongoing relationship and appearances on Roland Martin's publications, from TV1, News One, to his now Roland Martin Unfiltered, which I hope you all are members of. If not, please join Roland's digital broadcast. Dr. Manago has studied behavioral health and cultural anthropology at New College of California, began his doctoral studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, and he holds a doctorate in cultural and religious studies from Price University, and is a community faculty at Charles Drew University of Science and Medicine in LA. He has visited with us on many occasions and is always enlightening. Today will be no exception. So please join me in welcoming to our platform, Dr. Cleo Manago. Hey, Cleo.
Hey, Iggy, what's going on?
I'm good. So I'm going to bow out, turn it all over to you, but I'm here in the background for anything you need me for. I'm here. Okay.
Well, thank you.
All right.
My first question is, can everybody hear me? Am I clear?
Just use your hands. I think so. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, for some time, for many, many years, I have seen evidence in this society, particularly through media, and even through the toxicity of the lyrics that are allowed. Most of the, many of the lyrics of popular songs these days, that there are forces, influences, I would even say just to split Black men and women from each other. The most current, unique compared to the past strategy has been to barely show images of Black people loving each other in media, commercials, movies, shows. The exception might be a comedy, but when it comes to depictions of Black people that can be taken seriously or that has dimension beyond just a laugh track, it's very rare to see Black people who love Black people. Now, it's very, particularly these days, easy to see Black people loving white people. Just this morning, I tried to find something to watch that affirmed Black people, that affirmed Black love, that was a reliable example of Black love, and I had a hard time. The majority of the films, whether it was Netflix, Prime, whatever it's called, and all these different streaming devices, almost every show Black people with white people. I saw lots of white shows. I didn't watch them, but I glanced them that showed white people deeply in love with each other, literally traveling around the world, get with each other, and passionate about their love, and lighthearted about their love in many instances. But it's almost no such thing in the pop cultural palette, if you will, or canvas, if you will, that shows Black people the same. My background is in behavioral health. I've done a lot of work around child development. All former children, we used to be kids, and Black children, including former children, in a daily reality where Black trauma is often depicted, Black somehow involved in the drug, illegal drug trade, such as Empire, or Power, or Snowfall, or most of the shows show us somehow violent criminalizing situations. And that's still the case. And there's a lot of feminists and other instances or influences that are really trying to make it problematic for Black men to even be seen as fully human in some ways. There was an article that came out maybe about 5 or 6 years ago that literally said that presumed to be heterosexual Black men were as much of a threat to Black people as supremacists. Somebody actually put that in writing, and it was published on the Grill 2 times. And I underscored that it was published 2 times because most people publish something once and move on. But for some reason, they republished that article twice. So I can go on and on with examples. But before I do, I'd like to hear from you and see if you have some exceptions to what I'm saying that you can add to the conversation if what I'm saying from your perspective is different.
So what we can do is, if you can use the apparatus at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand. If you're on the phone, just speak out because we can't see your hand. So is there anybody who wants to speak to what Dr. Cleo has already shared with us? I see, go ahead, Ms. Day.
Good afternoon.
Hi,
Good afternoon.
Hello, can you hear me?
we hear
I hear
you.
you just fine. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wanted to agree with you 100%. In fact, I've spoken about the image of the Black woman in particular. We used to be the moralistic character, and whenever we came on TV, we were always usually moralistic role. And as of today, you're looking at programs like Insecure that have us like some type of sexual addicts. Look at programs like All the Queen's Men. We are, strip clubs, and even from the one where what's the Black woman that was close to the president? She was I can't think of but she was assisting the president and doing all kinds of political
Kerry Washington scandal.
Scandal, exactly. Our
Olivia
image,
Pope, yes.
our image, there is almost nothing positive on the TV, and when it comes to the image of our men, they're always in a gay role. It seems not always, but majority. And so I have to agree with what you're saying. Uh, and the divide between Black men and Black women. Oh my God. Anyway, I'll just stop there and let someone else comment. But I just to say I agree with what you're saying.
Thank you, Ms. Bay. We just want short answers for right now. We'll get into deep dialogue later on. So Ms. Richland, you're next. If you want to say something very briefly about what you're feeling, that'd be appreciated.
Okay. Thank everybody. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what both of you are saying, because one of the things we do is curate our viewing for our kids we have a child left in the house, and our viewing is very curated because you have to sort of mind the feel of what you're putting into your head these days, because most of the viewing I do, the couples are mostly biracial couples or gay relationship, which I'm nothing against it, but it seems like we're only getting one perspective of love these days. And a heterosexual Black couple is rare to see. If you look at the commercials, boy, you don't see that anymore on the commercials. And most of our viewing is they're choosing the minority to highlight. So you might not even see a Black person in programming anymore.
Right.
So that's all I say for now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Richland. We'll take two more. I see Ruthie, and guys, don't leave this all up to the women. We have you here because we want you to be involved in this conversation. But I see two hands up. One is
Alan.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me? This is Daryl. Yeah, I'm trying to get this thing together so I really can conversation. Can you hear me though? If you hear me, then when I chance, just let me. Okay.
I hear you. Go ahead, Daryl. What were you saying?
I don't want to interfere with anybody. Who was next? I'll wait till after somebody talks.
Okay, well, you started talking, so I'll let you go ahead and speak for right now.
Okay. Yeah, what I would, I agree with, everything you guys saying. It's almost it's a time machine here. They're trying to take us back. Well, they are taking us backwards. And like you were saying about the commercials and stuff and everything, it has to be, it's almost like they're carrying our hands sometimes. Well, you got to have me if you want to get there, and we're some strong people and see this and they want us to start, they kind of like, I'm going to put you in place. And I'm kind of like, I don't know. I just try to tell my kids and, the way things really are. And like they're trying to take things out of school, don't want to show they don't want to show what they really about, and so we'll always, if we don't do what guys are doing now, we'll always be under the gun. I'll say under the gun, we always under the gun, but up under their regime, you know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
I got work to do.
If anybody, I'm going in and out. Can you hear me?
We hear you just fine.
Yeah, but and so at this point, sometime like my days are. I'm still here, but I got my youngsters growing up under me, my kids and stuff. Well, they're grown, but still, and they come share different things with me. And sometimes I get stuck. I don't know what to say. I said, son, just keep your head up. Don't never let keep doing what you're doing. He went to school and did his thing, but still he run into a lot of problems. I said, this will always be. And one guy told me, and this was a white guy. He told me, he said, Daryl, you know what? He said, oh, you guys, your race will burn this whole place down and start all over. It started all
We
over.
don't want to do that.
I know, but it was like a point. He admitted it, because he's, so-called one of my associates, and I talk to him sometime. But yeah, it's a heavy deal ahead of us, All
right. Thanks, Daryl.
I long ago noticed the dichotomy in the images that are put out for Black females and males as well. For the females, it's either this, sassy, not quite educated woman on one side, and then there's on the other side, there's this underworld woman who's had to survive through the ghetto and the street and sell her body, sell drugs in order to make it. And that's the image that's pushed.
Yeah.
They don't show, beautiful, educated women that don't have to rely
No,
on sass, that don't have to rely on what they call street smarts. But street smarts, if you're street smart, you never get in the street anyway. But that's the image that's pushed. And if you notice, it's marketing. It's always been marketing. It's always been attached to money because people buy the.
Well, one of the things that I want, thank you. One of the things I want to happen, and will happen in conversation, is for us to get to ways of navigating through this society and ways of deflecting the agenda to get us to think twice about loving and respecting each other. And I'm glad the brother brought up his kids, because parents are the initial gods of children and have a lot of influence initially. And frankly, a lot of parents either don't understand that or too busy working or doing whatever they're doing, realize that they need to be intentional parents in a racist society, or else kids will grow up confused. But I want to hear from at least two more of the people briefly before we go on.
So we have.
I'd like to say something. I don't know how to raise my hand, but I'd like to say something real briefly, if it's okay. I'm in the entertainment industry. I can promise you that the white controlled Black people through chains up until 1865, but even the Uncle Tom wanted the chain off of him. He controlled us through laws up until 1965, but even the white man wanted to spend his time front with the white man, even Uncle Tom. So today he intentionally, we need to score that, he intentionally controls us through the media. The only difference between the change and the law media is, with the change, we knew it was oppression. With the laws, we knew it was oppression. With the media, we think it's internet. And I'm going to say this is the last thing I'm going to say about it. As long as the white man controls our image, get freedom. Freedom is a joke and a pipe dream. We have to develop ways, which I love to talk to everybody often, to develop our own image and to control our own image, which we can once we become intentional about it. And I applaud everybody on this call, because this is the biggest thing I think we can do and deal with right now.
Okay, thank you. There are 4 hands. Cleo, can you see the hands?
I'm not.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm not able to raise my hand.
Okay, wait a
But I
minute.
did put something in the chat.
All right, we have 4 people with hands up. So Cleo, can you see them? You can call on people as you wish.
Okay,
The way I see them is Sonia Rice, Nicole, Demetrius, and Sonia
Yeah.
Brown. Ms.
So why don't we
Rice.
go in that order? Why don't we go in that order that you just mentioned, Helen? But let's be brief, because we're going to have time for participation. But I just wanted to find out if people understood what I was saying or had a different experience. So far, it sounds like you all have the same experience. So if that's the case, when you make your comments, make it as short as you can so we can get through the rest of the discussion.
Good afternoon. I am Son. One of the things I noticed in media, if there is a Black woman, she's a light-complected Black woman, or a woman from a woman of color, but you can tell because we don't all look alike, from another country. It's very rare that you pick a dark-complected American Black woman in any positive ways. Yet, because we survive, we know that they do get plenty of loving in our real world.
Okay. Thank you. That was Ms. Rice, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Very quickly, Nicole, very briefly, please.
Hello. I agree with everything that's been said so, but I just wanted to offer 2 exceptions, both on the OWN network. One, Dish the Day, an anthology that focuses each season on a different Black couple, and 2, Queen Sugar, which focuses on intergenerational Black love.
Okay. Thank you. Demetrius?
I just wanted to, what the sister just mentioned, one of my favorite 2 couples, Queen Sugar, is Violet and Howard. And just like one of the sisters that spoke about being intentional about her or child, I don't know if she said it was son or daughter, but we have to be very intentional in regards to find those shows that depict real, true Black love in the correct way. That's what I just wanted to say, because, we all know, what's not happening, but, just like I used to greet people back in the day, what's happening? So we have to find out what's happening out there so we can seek those things back.
Thank you, Demetrius. Ms. Blackman, very quickly, please.
Okay, very quickly, I missed the first 20 minutes or so, but for us to wholesome people as couples and Black love, this is something that I train my children who are adults. The Willie Lynch letter, how to build a slave. If we there, especially with our youth and our older people who don't know about it, it's in there about how to destroy Black relationships with men and women. And it lasts 350 years if they follow the blueprint and they followed the programming well for 350 years. We need to start there. And I train my own children on that, starting as young kids, teaching Black history to them every day. So we start there and move it up and bring it to today's time. We wouldn't have as many divisions as we have within the community with Black love, colorism, and racism. I'm appalled that I've had to teach my chocolate children more about colorism than more about racism.
Thank you. Okay, well, I want to respond to what I've heard. Remember, the last thing I heard, and remember the macro or all focus is Black male and female relationships, but we are unpacking some of the elements that influence us to think twice about loving each other. But I want to talk about colorism. There's a lot of words that we have been trained to use that make it ambiguous what's really going on. And the word colorism, one of those words, because what colorism really describes is being farther or closer to white. And I am one to say that we should be explicit about what we're saying, because there's already enough veiled attacks on us and things that happen in this culture that are attacks that people don't realize are attacks. So we should talk in ways that, and I know colorism is a terminology that's been part of my background as well, because I live in America. Behavioral health expert and someone who looks at behavior change among Black people, deflecting the ravages of white supremacy mythology and toxic levels of patriarchy. I want us to be very thoughtful, particularly in the presence of children and former children, about how we say things, get crystal clear. So-called colorism is really a phenomena that treats people one way or the other based on how close or far from white they are. So let's be clear about that. Somebody also mentioned a show called Cherish Today, which I've never seen, so I can that. I did see Queen Sugar once or twice, and I remember Violet in Hollywood. I remember that show, but it also had other things in it that it's been so long since I watched it that were problematic for Black people. But I want to say this, that most of the shows about Black people are not love stories. Most of the stories that are love stories by a huge proportion are white. So even we can pull out our magnifying glass and find apparently a Cherish a Day, et cetera, we still got to understand imbalance. Our young people still amidst an imbalance where they cannot rely on a Black love story as much as they can in higher numbers among whites, which implies even if there's 1 or 2 examples that we, relatively speaking, are lower in value and love each other has less value on a societal level. In case anybody here thinks that maybe I am seeing things, people who have said what they have said about, who have agreed with me are seeing things, let me tell you something that you can't help but to face as a fact. This is a capitalist country. Capitalist countries usually are ran by the market, about promoting your wares and make as much money as you can and promote your products to the largest population possible, or populations possible, can make the biggest profit. Well, this is how serious white supremacy mythology is. And I'll tell you all in a mythology in a moment if I can remember, or if you have a question about that. All of this focus on biracial people is a focus on a subset of the society that is outnumbered by both Black people and white people. So it's not logical in a capitalist society to keep promoting your products, particularly when it's Black people, to a subset of the population. That does not make sense from a capitalist perspective. So if you're going to constantly show a subpopulation that's outnumbered by the larger Black population in a capitalist society, that means that they have a goal, which is social control. So I want to want people who may be questioning the validity of this perspective to look at that. It's a fact that this is a capitalist country. In fact, that capital is successful based on market share and based on promoting your products to the largest population. And now corporate America is promoting their products to the smallest population. And one day, given their agenda and how gullible some of us are, and the lack of deflection and critiquing that we're encouraged to have, they might get their way. They might become the majority one day, which but it's not true now. So they're promoting their products to a mythological organization or community in terms of numbers. Somebody mentioned the Willie Lynch. Now, there's some of you here, I'm sure, who's heard somebody say, well, there's no Willie Lynch. And who's heard that before? That the Willie Lynch letters is not true?
Yeah, it's a concept. We hear it all the time.
Okay. Now, when people tell me that, stay calm, and I mentioned staying calm because that's part of my strategy. I never ever hostile with other Black people. I never vicious or abusive or mean to other Black people. No matter how much I get on my last nerves, my strategy is to stay calm because we're already traumatized. This society traumatizes Black people, and it teaches Black people to traumatize each other every day in all kinds of ways, including the perpetual N-word. That's a traumatizing term that causes trauma in our minds, but we don't realize it because it's such a normal thing. But it's important to say that for them to understand that, okay, there's a Willie Lynch phenomenon. If you don't want to say that Willie Lynch existed, fine. But there is a Willie Lynch phenomenon, for sure. Also, why don't we get that upset about Santa Claus and all kinds of other things that are not true, that we are passive about in the presence of it? But I've seen people jump high in the sky. That ain't true. That Willie Lynch stuff is not true. But we're surrounded by things that are not true that we don't question. So my point is that whether Willie Lynch existed or not, the phenomena that somebody wrote about called the Willie Lynch letter indeed does exist. So my goal is to make sure that you're critically thinking and that you are proactively doing something about the conditions that we face. Another thing I want to say before getting right to the issue of male and female relationships is that there's other groups in this country who have almost no representation in media, particularly, for example, among groups. But overall, and of course, there's some recent exceptions to that, but still overall, they're not depicted that much, but they're not complaining. Could three people, and it's going to be first come, first serve. Could three people tell me why they're not complaining about that to the level that we have in the past in terms of representation?
Anybody? Demetrius?
Particularly with Asians, historically, they have been an enclosed community where they have identity established very early out. Even when England tried to go in, and anybody ever heard of the Box Rebellion, we had to inject, not literally and figuratively inject heroin into it so they can destabilize China, and they kicked their behinds up out of there. Even the China Wall. So that's just an example. They don't necessarily seek, Western validation. And there's a lot of people who don't seek Western validation, but do. And that's because we were devalued by the very people who we seek validation from.
Exactly.
Thank you. Ruthie's calling in from Japan, so she might have an interesting perspective. Go ahead, Ruthie.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cleo, for this bringing this topic. But yeah, I've been in Japan for 20 years, and Japanese are conformists, and it's still a very, very closed society. So even though they need persons from outside of Japan to come in to work They're very conformist, and they operate as a group. There's no one, no individuality. And we know as Americans, we are individuals. Yeah, we can function in a group. But here in Japan, they do everything for the good of the group, and they will protect the group regardless of whether the person is right or wrong. So I think that's a major difference between what I see in terms of Japan compared to America.
Thank you, Ms. Ruthie.
Thank you.
Ms. Bay, very briefly, please.
Hello?
Very briefly, Ms. Bay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because they support each other, very.
Yeah. Are you there?
Me?
No, you're going in and out. Ms. Bay?
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we got you, we got the gist of what you said. The same thing, kind of what he was saying. There's a collective, we suffer from, not.
And one other thing, they also have within their circles, rituals for introducing young people to other Asians, so they don't need to come out to the public and appeal to the public to increase their families or whatever.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to continue. Thank you for those comments, and they were very helpful. And because the bottom line is that these other communities are self-contained. They're self-contained. They're not codependent on whiteness. Even when it comes to the president of the United States or whatever, they might vote for what's strategically helpful to them as a group, but they don't care about them people. They care about what's going to help their group. And that's why they make the decisions that they make, but they're self-contained. Now, to be clear, we were once very self-contained. You've heard of Rosewood. You've heard of so-called Black Wall Street. You probably heard of the movement in Philadelphia. There were very successful, thriving Black communities all over this country that were Black-led, Black-governed, that were full of commerce, had done well, and were independent. However, each one of them were destroyed intentionally and attacked. There's something scary for Black people to be self-contained and have unity compared to other groups. And one of the reasons for that is because they didn't enslave those other groups. They're not worried about revolution from those other groups. They're not worried about those groups getting revenge because they didn't do what they did to the groups that they did to us. So we're under a perpetual assault, non-stop assaults. And they come up with new strategies all the time.
Every day.
And right now we're in the midst of a strategy that's really influencing our kids, impacting Black male and female relationships and Black on Black relationships, period. And that I mentioned before, this biracial push, where you can see, for example, a commercial or a TV show with a very white father and a child who's clearly Black with no other parent. And then sometimes they'll show both parents, the white and the Black parents. Lots of commercials and movies where there's only one parent and he or she is white and the child has a. So you know there's somebody Black involved, but what occurs in this society is not often what's said, but what's implied, the symbolism. There's no conversations on TV about this biracialism in any kind of blatant way, but it's there. And because there's no conversation about it, that's why it's influencing it, because we're not being taught to deflect it. We're not being taught to look at it sideways. We're not taught to admit that, wait a minute, why is everybody Black with somebody white in almost every show? Trained to look at this with a critical eye, so therefore we internalize it. For example, I went to get my car fixed by this young man recently, and he recognized me from television or someplace, and he asked me if I was who I was, and I told him I was who I was. And everybody wants to talk, quote, Black with me, because of the reputation. Anyway, he started talking about his kids. He has 5 kids. And somehow I got him to admit, well, I shouldn't use the word admit, it's not longer than how I approach it. in conversation, I got him to actually engage what people his kids were with, because I'm intrigued with what's happening with these children. Make a long story short, all 5 of his kids, all 5 of his kids had white partners. And the irony is that he is still married to his wife, who's Black. So again, I went into strategy mode and I watched my behavior, make sure I wasn't coming off judgmental, mean, or abusive, or doing anything that's going to create new trauma and judgment. So I said to him, smile to be nice. I said, so how do you explain that? Why do you believe that 5 of your kids have white partners? And what was tragic about it was that he couldn't explain it. One of the things that white supremacy has so effectively put in Black people is accepting everything.
Yep.
Loving everybody, and seeing it all as progress. And this is a good thing that Black people get to marry white people. So I'm telling you what people say. He didn't say none of those things initially. He looked at kind of sideways because he didn't know what to say. And I said, they extended family, right? He said, yes. I said, they have Black uncles and aunts and cousins and people in the neighborhood. They said, yes. I said, so how do you, just take a guess, how would you explain it? One of the things that you may remember when Helen introduced me is she taught the CTCA methodology that I developed, that I call a trance breaking methodology. They're in a trance as a people. This man was in a trance. He explained how his children came out the way they are because he's not fully awake. He's just survived, trying to have some joy, trying to have some good food, trying to get his job done, but he's not living life intentionally to combat the impact of white supremacy mythology on his family. He's one of these people that clearly was not saying anything was wrong with it, though it bothered him. And guess who it bothers the most? The mother. The mother, it takes it personally, because I was able to talk to her later. The mother took it personally that her sons was coming home with white girls, but she didn't say nothing. She was going along with the okie doke because she didn't want to offend nobody. Now, what's really strange about this perspective of not offending nobody, she's talking about her kids. She's not talking about some external group of people somewhere. She's talking about she want to offend her own children. And when I got to talk to her and she said that, I said, offend your children how? Offend who? Who are you trying not to offend for real? And guess who they really are trying not to offend? Two people, real quick. Who do they really try to offend?
White folks.
White folks.
White partner.
Your mama and the children.
They're trying they're trying not to offend white folks, even when white folks aren't fair. Even when ain't nobody there but Black folks.
Yeah.
They still trying to offend white folks. And they still whisper when they go, there's this girl at my job. And everybody's Black and most of the people are grown and folks are still whispering like children. Because one of the side of white supremacy mythology, the trauma trance unresolved, is that it causes a certain level of adolescence among Black people. Mm-hmm. Well, we do childish things for a longer time than we should because we have been repressed by not resolving the impact of white supremacy mythology on us. Now, let me explain what I mean by mythology, in case some of you don't get it. Some of you probably will get it, but it's a myth, and I know it for a fact, based on research, observation, logic, that white people are not superior to us at all. They are not superior to us at all. And the reason they keep us psychically unstable in an internal war, now facing them as our love interest, because they don't want us to ever come to grips with how powerful and how important we are to the human story. For example, if you go to the census and you go and you see people are identified as Egyptian, even though the real word is Kemetic, but the Greeks changed it to they have to identify as white in this country. People from Africa, Northeast Africa, some of them who make me look light-skinned, have to put in the census that they're white. Now, two people to tell me what that's about. Why they doing that?
The
So they can
assimilation,
be as a majority.
Say that again?
So they can be seen as the majority. And it causes them to then buy in this system of white supremacy and power.
Those definitely fit the answer, but I'm gonna give you another answer that's even more true.
can I say one real quick?
Let me take a
Sure.
stab at it. Go ahead.
Sure.
The Assimilation Act started a lot of that too. Are you aware of the Assimilation Act?
Absolutely.
When the Asians came over, the white folks, they had to sign that and they had to say that they were white on all documents, had to actually be white. And so that's another reason that we have these other groups saying that they're white, because it was forced upon them.
Right. Well,
Can I ask
you're
you,
all right.
can I ask you one
correct.
question?
Yeah, sure.
Why even that what you're saying has transferred all, in Africa, man, they be trying to, make themselves white with some kind of, I don't know what they're using on to bleach their skin. And that
Bleaching
bothered me
cream.
more than
Yeah.
bleaching cream. That would be more than anything to see where a place where when I was telling Helen about when I first went, they was doing it. Then she told me, yeah, they bleaching, they did. I don't. Oh wow, that baffles me there. I don't know.
Let me jump in and say, Cleo, the answer that I think to your question is, you said, why do we think they do that? So one of the things that they're famous for is saying Middle Eastern, Northern African people on the census are forced to choose to identify themselves as white. Clearly, these are not white people. I think it has a lot to do with the numbers. So, it's about census numbers, because white people, as we all know, are going to be the minority in this country very soon. So there's this manipulation about what it means to be white. There's a manipulation about what it means to be Black. That's this whole fascination with, biracial, because at the end of the day, these people are checking. So it's cloud the issue about what it means to be Black, to reduce our numbers, and then inflate, because when these Middle Eastern, Northern African people and others who get to check the white box, when they try to show up as white, that's when they get their rude awakening. So it's just for census purposes. That's my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are. So go ahead, Cleo.
You're right about the Assimilation Act. You're right about there is a tendency on as many white people to be white as possible. However, when they show these other groups on, let's say, National Geographic or some type of other historical program, they'll show them as they really are ethically. If you've seen pictures of King Tut or pictures of what's her name? Darn it, King Tut's mother. Forgot her name now. Anyway, these people are being artificially lighter than they are. One of the main issues, this is how diabolical, that Egyptians are targeted, is because the place called Egypt is one of the most sophisticated ancient societies in history. They have done things that nobody else has been able to replicate. And even white scientists, nobody else can even explain. I don't want that level of sophistication and genius and mystery to have a Black source. So I want us to be real clear that that's a little bit more deep in the Assimilation Act, or what they have in Brazil called blanqueamiento. In South America, they have a agenda called blanqueamiento, which means whitening, which is whitening agenda that's literally on the parliamentary books, where they want Black people to get with white people and create more people that are not Black, so they can prevent the hostility among a population as much as possible, because they don't want any hostile Blacks. This is why people like Joy Reid was able to stay on MSNBC after they got rid of Dolores Perry, Tamron Hall before she married the white man, and some other Black people they got rid of, but they don't get rid of people who are not African American, because there's a different energy in terms of the history of slavery between Africans from the continent and Africans in this country. And it looks like it's inclusive of Black people when they're African, even though eliminating Black African Americans out of the picture. But if we're critical thinkers, we won't see what they're up to. But somebody said earlier that maybe Asians don't want to lose their model minority status. That might be why they don't say anything. No, the real issue is that they're self-contained, they're handling business. There's a Chinatown in every major city in this country, which Black Wall Street would have been the equivalent of an Africa town, well, that was destroyed. And they're sitting up shop and taking care of themselves independently, no matter what's happening in no matter what the stock market is saying, no matter who's the president, no matter what's ever going on, they have his back. And like the sister said, who's in Japan, and a term I use, they're self-contained and each other are hooked up regardless. But I want to reiterate, so we can be real clear about the attack, that we used to do the same thing. Thank you. That's mother was Queen Ty. Robert Spencer just informed us. We used to do the same thing, but now we are, as far as we're concerned, we're more liberated. But the bottom line is that my brother who I met, who was fixing my car, who's all his children marry white people, we are not intentional parents. We are white accommodationists. Not by choice, but by default. Because if you don't live your life intent to deflect the fact that racism is a problem, your children, particularly these days, is going to wind up being a white supremacist.
Right, you're right. Yep.
I speak Black kids all the time. So many of them work for me. I speak in universities all the time. I'm always asking young people and older people in their 30s and 40s, I ask them, and this question is to inspire the parents and guardians of children of all ages in this conversation. Consider what I'm going to say. I ask them, have your parents or your guardians ever sat you down intently to teach you about the issue of white supremacy / racism, how it works and what it is? Has your guardians ever done that? And I'm talking about on a national basis for going on 30 years of this survey. And the mass majority of people who I ask that question to say no. But what they all heard is this. This is what they all heard. And all of you will remember this, or you may have said it yourself. You got to work twice as white man.
Yeah.
You got to work twice as hard as the white man. And that's racism 101.
Yes, sir.
That's racism 101. And that's what they hear. But let me tell you what's wrong with it. And believe it or not, all of this anti-Black implications impact male and female relationships. We're going to get to that more explicitly. But this is what you're doing when you tell a child, a Black child, or when you heard it as a former child, that you have to be twice as a white man, is that you're implying, if you don't give them the whole story, that they're twice as bad. They have to make up for it twice because they're Black. That's what you're inadvertently implying when you just say, well, baby, you got to work twice as good as a white man to make it in society without telling them the whole story. This is the whole story. This is what they don't hear. Baby, this society was built on a human corruption called racism, the white supremacy, delusional behavior, or mythology, or they had this thing called manifest destiny. And these folks were crazy. These folks was tripping. Because they were tripping and because they have issues and they're insecure and they have a fear of mediocrity, they got some sociopathological issues. You got to work twice as hard because they are too messed up to see how great you are and how brilliant and how wonderful you are. So since they don't understand that, you got to work twice as hard, not because something's wrong with you, baby, but because nothing is perfect and there are corruptions in this society, and one of them is racism. Now, if you say something like that to your child, You won't be implying accidentally that something's wrong because they're already hearing the N-word every day. They're already hearing stuff like sit your black ass and the equivalent. They're already hearing that. I'm gonna close this part of the talk by reinforcing something to make my point in terms of how serious we have to get reflecting the impact of racism, white supremacy mythology. There's a film that came out in the early 2000s, might have been 2005, called A Girl Like Me, made by a young college student, young Black female college student. The film was called A Girl Like Me. You can still find it on YouTube for free. And in this film, among other things, the young lady recreates the doll test. And for the record, the doll test, which is a choice between by the Clarks, which were doctor psychologists, a black couple, they created the doll test where Black children chose the black doll, the white doll in the late. Well, from the late 30s to 2022, the outcome has been the same. Most of the children picked the white doll. The sister's last name is Davis. Somebody is helping to inform this conversation, which I really appreciate. So the most of the Black children still choosing the white doll because the factors leading them to make that crazy decision have not evolved. Because we're not intentionally raising our children, we're passively raising them and often sending them to pray to a white Jesus, which implies that God is, which reinforces the myth that they're inferior, which is about as true as Santa Claus in terms of God being white. Anyway, this is the part that I want you to understand that's real deep. Some of those babies in that documentary had locks. Now, locks have to be taken care of. Locks are not just there. You have to make sure that locks are beautiful and that they look good. You have to do a little bit of work. And you got to do it no matter what your hairstyle is, by the way. So I want to make that clear. But the intent among these parents who gave their babies locks was that they loved themselves as Black people. And they were shocked when their children chose the white doll. Well, this is the issue. And just yesterday, I was at Walmart and I saw a Black mother with 3 beautiful little girls who white dolls for these girls. And I intervened, and that's a whole story in terms of what happened when I intervened.
Do you all know anybody that down with getting off to ourselves and developing our own communities?
Well, yeah. And I hope we get a chance to talk about that. But that's I'm down with that, and I'm doing some work around something like that. However, for those of us there yet, who are still in the trauma trance, I'm trying to get you to come out of the trauma trance and understand some of the work that must be done. Just because you have a kufi on, and just because you have a dashiki on, and just because you have locks, does not mean you resolve internalized white supremacy. The way you would resolve internalized white supremacy is, as I said before, is take the factors that lead to questioning our worth out of the abstract. Like when you say colorism, say what it really is. Don't tell your children you gotta be twice as good as a white man without explaining them in a way that affirms them as Black when you get finished with the conversation. See television, which a lot of our parents and all parents of all races literally use as a babysitter. Baby, go sit down. Go watch TV. They're trying to get the children out of their head. Well, that's fine if you teach your children how to watch TV with a critical eye. And when they watch the television and they don't see themselves, make sure they know, okay, that's part of the social corruption and deficiency, baby, that I told you. It's wrong. It's about as real as Superman. None of these things exist. And we can't control the TV, but you can control how you interpret the TV. And a lot of it is mythology, baby. And you understand that you watching stuff that's not true, and white people are not better than you. They just have issues and they have control right now. And they're trying to make you think that, but it ain't true. So as we ourselves to become critical thinkers and to navigate while awake in society, we have to also look at that Black men in particular, and some would say Black women, and that's true more now than before, are Black men are being led to look at white women as the symbol of love and happiness. There was a football player whose name escapes me, who was confronted by, I think it was women because he chased white women all the time, and he said something about he didn't want to be with a bulldog.
Come on.
Anybody remember? Anybody remember that?
Wow.
I'm shocked. Nobody recalls that. This group is usually good at remembering these
Yeah, I
things.
believe you. Yeah, no.
I forgot, was that basketball or NFL?
Yeah. Basketball. Yeah.
What, Charles
Also-
Barkley? No.
No.
Oh gosh.
Oh,
He's at,
that's who it could have been.
he's at risk, but it wasn't him. It wasn't him. It was a younger, more recent player. And another thing that occurred too, which is ironic, is that Tyree Nichols, remember the brother that was murdered in Memphis? Well, they went through his social media, and what kind of perked my interest, because I think, is when they showed a picture of him and his child. And his child was clearly biracial. Then they went into his social media account and saw all these anti-Black female commentary that he made. See, a lot of the stuff that we think is just simple people not seeing color and falling in love, no, it's an anti-Black impulse.
But you know, even deeper than that, Cleo, with the Tyree Nichols thing, it didn't much come to light, but you know, 6 Black men essentially lost their lives over some nonsense surrounding a white woman because Tyree was having a relationship with a white woman that the leading cop and all of that, that was his woman or his former woman or whatever. And Tyree clearly, you know, seemingly didn't know what was happening, but you figure this one brother convinced 5 other brother officers to join in with, or was it 5 cops, so 4 of them, to join in with them and beat another Black man to death over essentially involvement with a white woman. That's just crazy. And of course, we have to talk about what's happening right now. What's the brother in the news right now? Mr. What's his name? Help me, somebody.
Jonathan Majors and Morgan.
Yes, Jonathan Majors.
Majors, yeah.
Yeah, so go ahead, Cleo, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to mention that people keep helping me, and I appreciate NBA player Robin Spencer be on her stuff. Thank you, Robin. The basketball we're talking about is Patrick Patterson, who called Black women a bulldog. And then there was a young man in Sacramento, whose name escapes me, about 4 years ago, who was killed. He was in the back, he ran from the cops, his grandmother's backyard. He pulled out his phone to call her, and they shot him to death and claimed they thought it was a gun. And then they went into his media account, and he said something about dark women create dark days. Now, when Black women hear this, and when this Black man, it's heartbreaking. But I'm trying to get you to understand that we have to lean on this, because this society is teaching us to have these kind of impulses toward each other. Because in this massive attack on Black men, Black women, there's not a whole lot of conversation about how it's impacted Black male-female relationships on a macro level. And young people are having children who are not developed enough to have critical analysis to do what we need done to act like we used to act back like Wall Street, like the Japanese do now, and even some African groups who come over here as immigrants now who are more self-contained than we are.
I have a quick question. This is, okay, so of course I'm a Black female. I've noticed in the last 30 years or so, Black women, as far as them being labeled bulldogs, etc. I don't empathize with the brothers who want to go over on the other side, and I'm fine with chooses love wherever they choose it. But I have seen the Black bulldog mentality they're talking about in corporate America. I've seen it in college. I've seen it in the community. and that black dog mentality and bulldog mentality is real. I've seen dinners with educated, successful Black women who pull out the bulldog competition, attitudes, you name it. And I've seen successful women and women who are, lower class, middle, upper class. So when Black men say those things, I 1% of me can empathize, because I have ducked and dodged that bulldog mentality myself, and it's very painful. And it comes from, this is my take on it, it comes from Mary J. Blige just made Black women understand good morning, gorgeous. Okay, that's that self-hate. Mary J. Blige didn't have to tell me that. I was raised that way. I was raised to love myself. I raised up in Black Wall Street, North Carolina, 200 Black-owned businesses, the whole nine. But when I go outside of that circle, especially in corporate America and wherever, that bulldog thing surfaces every single time. So I can understand where these brothers are going with that. We have got to do something about the system, especially the ones over the age of 40, 50, and 60. It is the worst.
Wow. I mean, I understand. Can I say something?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
my mute was on. Wait a minute, Daryl. There's a few hands that are up.
Go
But
ahead.
but Cleo, I'm not taking you handle. There are some hands,
Fine.
deal with it. Okay. So Miss Spencer, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I love this session. It's hard to listen because there's so many levels to this. One section was talking about tourism and being a light-skinned Black female. I was taught, Black was definitely taught in, African-American was taught in my household, and I brought that to my daughter. But as an educator in a Black district where I teach, which is Haitian, Jamaican, African, and African-American, it's amazing that they don't want to learn of Black history. They are ashamed of the history. And earlier someone said, they only depict dark-skinned females. Well, I don't believe, I think it has changed a lot from the 70s up until now, but I do believe that we also touched on how they're mixed. They're not Black. And what annoys me, is the rap, the music, but the parents feed into it too. So as long as they're still saying Redbone, as long as they're still in dark, hashtag Black skin, you're feeding into and you're perpetuating colorism and the divisiveness amongst ourselves.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Spencer.
Can I say something?
Wait a minute,
Can
Daryl.
you
We
hear me?
gotta take this in order. Go ahead.
Okay.
Cleo, you can call on whoever you want now.
I wanted to comment first before I call on anyone, and I definitely need your help with the calling people in order, Helen, because I'm trying to have a conversation and I don't want to facilitate that part too. It'd be cool if you took over that.
Problem.
But I want to start looking at these things from a dimensional perspective. This that I'm talking about right now is the bulldog, the bulldog accusation of Black women, and the that I just mentioned that she implied that I know what they're talking about because I've seen it myself. When I was an undergrad, and this will show my age, how old I am. That's all right. When I was an undergrad, there was this thing called online. I don't know if anybody ever remember that. You know, we got Facebook and all these things now. But when I was an undergrad, they had this thing called America Online. And America Online chat groups and all this stuff. You almost never could see nobody now unless they had their in their profile, but it was America Online. And I did a project on interracial dating. And this was in the 90s. I was a full-grown adult as an undergrad, so I don't want you to think I was young back then. No, I was grown. I just went back to school as an adult. Anyway, to make a long story short, I interviewed 300 people. I interviewed white people who dated Black people. If you remember America Online, they had groups called Black and White and blah, blah, blah. They had these different groups that you can go and join if you wanted to. I interviewed same-gender loving people, gay-identified people, sexual people, and people in different configurations who are into Black or white. There's a lot of data. The bottom line is the white people tended to talk about texture. They like the dichotomy between Black and white skin. They off on the hair texture. There was a lot of physical fetishizing of the Black body. The white people, the Black people, it was in almost every instance, it was anti-Black. It was an anti-Black reason. Now, what I did, and I got a white guy's permission to do this, who was a classmate of mine, was there were viewers who were actually doing the interviewers. They both me, but I came off with my own picture when I was Black interviewing people. And I used my white associate's face and said I was him when I was interviewing people as well. And when I was white, the Black people, there were exceptions of this, but the majority of Black people, no matter how rude and how nasty I was to them, they were like, say that. Because one time I said, as a white man, I said, I love America. You can throw Black people around and dog them out and treat them bad, and they still want you. And the Black people were like, don't say that. That's not nice. But when I did something that was equally rude as a Black person, they was cussing me out and blocking me. AOL, they had the blocking capacity too. So it might be true, this so-called bulldog thing that is causing this stuff. But the bottom line is Black people are conditioned to be anti, and we don't know our history. So when we see the behavioral outcome of frustration among Black women or among Black men, we blame it on Black people. We blame it on N-words. I don't use that word, but you know what the word is. We have no white supremacy methodology critical analysis. So we think all of our problems are simply because we're Black. And as it was just mentioned by an educator, we're embarrassed about Black history. We don't want to hear it. Well, if they knew Black history, they would want to hear it. Mm-hmm. We didn't start off by a long shot as enslaved people. History, that's so amazing. They want us to call ourselves white if we come from Kemet. That's how amazing our history is. And we don't know about Sawa and Shaka Zulu and Queen Nzinga and all these African people. We don't know nothing about them. So all we know about is that Harriet Tubman ran all the way from Canada to get away from these Blacks because we were so oppressed. And we look like weak victims who are constantly subject to white's whims, which means we're inferior. And nobody want to hear from these inferior N-words. And we say stuff like, act your age, not your color. And you got to work as hard as a white man, nigger. So what Black people see sometimes between each other is the impact of frustration. And we don't know context. So we run to white people for shelter, which is ironic. because it's the condition of being in a white supremacist culture that's made us so frustrated that we go off on each other. As a matter of fact, some of you know enough about the enslavement period that we had to take our frustrations out on each other for 200 years because it was safer than taking it out at the root of the cause. It was safer to beat each other up and suffer something we still suffer to this very day, which is misdirected rage. We still whispering the word white. We still are worried about offending white people, even if they're not around. It's hard to have mental health, peace, and tranquility if you don't resolve that type of mental disorder. And that young man, Patrick, whatever his name is, who called Black women bulldogs, look, yeah, there's Black women in corporate America doing blah, blah, blah. But
Is he frozen for you all or just for me?
I see.
Go ahead.
What was that?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So it's not like these so-called bulldogs who are in these corporate places are the majority. Most of us are not even in the corporate America. But we also suffer something that I call racialization. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, say so, and I'll repeat it in a different way. But what I mean by racialization is, and I've tested this. Well, I'll tell you a exercise I do when I speak in different places to make this point. And I first did it when I spoke at Brown University in Rhode Island. And I'm breaking down to you the phenomena of racialization that Black people have been trained to do, similar to the Willie Lynch phenomenon. This was in the 90s when I first did this exercise. And I was speaking to a large faculty at this university that had some Black people there, but it was predominantly white. And I was the guest speaker for February because it was Black History Month and somebody convinced the school to invite me to be the speaker. So when I got there, I said a few words and I said, white people, get up. Stand up, white folks.
You told us about that.
Oh, I already told you about that. Okay.
But you can share it again. Everybody here, so go
All
ahead.
right, so because some of y'all probably wasn't there. But anyway, I said, stand up, white folks. And the white folks looked at each other and like, no, he didn't. Because I was purposely rough the way I said it in the microphone. I was purposely trying to get into their skin. And they looked at each other like, no, who's he talking to? I said, come on, stand up, white folks. It ain't gonna kill you, get on up. So the majority of them stood up. And to make a long story shorter, I said, do y'all have ever been to Walmart? You ever been to Bank of America? You ever been to Kinko's? You ever been to Apple Computer? And been to any of these places and you were not satisfied with the business or they did something wrong? And all of them said yes. I said, did you say I ain't never going back to those crackers again? I ain't never going back to those honkies again. I'm tired of white folks and they shit. And they were so shocked by that notion. They looked at me like I was out of my mind, like, what? But the Black people there were looking at me nervous. So I said, sit down, white folks. And then they sat down, but they were completely like shocked and bewildered by the exercise. They were like, huh, nobody does that. I said, stand up, Black folks. And the Black folks looked at each other. They were worried about being embarrassed in front of their white faculty members. And before they could start fainting, I said, sit down, Black folks.
Can you guys hear? Is he frozen for everybody or is it just me?
He's frozen for everybody.
Okay.
Frozen for everybody.
Yeah, he'll be back. While we're waiting for him, there's some hands that are up. So I think you all got the crux of that exercise where, how many of us have not said, you call the Black plumber doesn't do the job as well as you think he should. And what's the first thing that we say? that, I'm never gonna call a Black plumber again. And we never say that. You go to a white restaurant or a white dry cleaner or whatever, never do we say, I'm never gonna go back to a white dry cleaner or whatever. So that's this whole internalization of self-hatred that we have to work with, which is, I think, where Cleo was going with that. Looks like he's dropped off, and I'm sure he'll sign back in.
Well, look at what we got going on right now in terms of
Right, go
topic.
ahead, Mr. Beckford. I was gonna call on you. Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Look at what's going on, and this ties into the topic. What we got going on right now, and I'm sure most of you all have heard this, the term divestors. That's a serious problem. Divestors. And what's the other one? Swirlers.
Go ahead and explain those terms for those who are not familiar with it.
A divestor is somebody, in other words, let's say you have chosen to distance yourself from me as a Black man in terms of romantic relationships. Or you call yourself a swirler, meaning that you are purposely engaging in interracial relations because you have a negative outlook towards me and other Black men. That's very real, and that's happening. You see it on social media, and it's having an impact. What I don't understand is this, and I'm gonna go here. I'm not trying to hot dog the conversation, but I'm gonna go here because this has just been gnawing at me. I want somebody to explain to me. You use the term so-called colorism. In spite of what we're confronted with all these images, which kind of goes into what Cleo was talking about in terms of all this interracial stuff. I want folk under the sound of my voice to explain to me, how is it and why is it that within the Black community, even if you go to Disneyland or just somewhere out in the street, the vast majority of Black men who are of a darker hue have Black women on their arms who are of a darker hue, or they're at the very least nuanced. It is not the way the sports figures are portrayed. You get the impression, the ones that they highlight, that that's everybody, when the fact of the matter is, it is not. I was listening to a program yesterday and it was driving me nuts. 2 Black women who are socially aware had bought into this narrative. That's a serious, serious problem. That's a real serious. So, and here's the thing: the vast majority, truth be told, of men who are, let's say, of a lighter hue, whether they have mixed parentage or not, the vast majority, with an exception of a few, the vast majority of them are not checking for sisters who are dark skinned. But the irony is, Black men who are of a darker hue receive the brunt of those attacks. I want somebody to really explain that. I even had this conversation with a woman who's in her 80s and said, I hadn't really looked at that, which means that during her younger years, she had bought into that stuff.
Wow. So that's very interesting, and I'm sorry that Cleo is not here to speak to that. That has not been my, but I haven't. And that's why we want Black men on this call, because you're looking at this whole situation from a different perspective, right? Because as a Black woman, I'm just speaking for Helen. I don't know if others can speak to it. When I'm looking at the whole interracial couple, I'm not really paying attention to the trends in terms of, dark skin with dark skin or light skin. Or, I remember when I moved to California, and Daryl, you remember those days. I came from Chocolate City. DC was still chocolate, and brothers were hitting on you. You walk out in the street looking your absolute worst, but you can just best believe some brother was going to try to pick you up. It didn't matter. They were enamored with us as Black women. So to move from that, which I took it for granted, I ain't gonna lie, but Black men are your natural partner. And then to move from there to California, where you could be Holly Berry, you could be fine if you want to be. And Black men, as a rule, were not attracted to Black women. And back then, I remember reading the personals, and Cleo's back. Thank you, Cleo. You missed a good observation that I can't speak to, so unfortunately. But anyway, I remember reading the personals, and it would say, they don't have personals anymore, but it would say BM, Black male, looks for AHW, Asian, Hispanic, white woman. They weren't even looking for Black women. And so, I don't know, as you say, Mr. Beckford, is it Is there an exaggeration on this whole thing with interracial dating? Is it not as prevalent or as
No,
bad as
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is
Why
that
you're saying the dark skin guy? I have not heard that.
Okay.
I would like, can I say something right here?
Ms. Blackman, let's bring Cleo back in real quick. Go ahead.
I'm gonna jump in right there and give an example of something that happened historically that answers Mr. Bedford's question.
Very quickly, please.
Oh, okay, so the movie Queen, which is Alex Haley's it was something very important in there where she said when master would rape the black slave female, he told them, even though they monitored their ovulation, that even when he raped her in front of their black husbands, that their master says that we can't have no brown babies that come out of me. So that started this light skinned field slave, house slave situation. And to answer your question, Mr. Bedford, I have a lot of dark skinned brothers who talk about in their families growing up, these guys in their 50s and 60s, their grandmothers and everyone told them that they need to get a light skinned black woman in order for them to have take a chance to have light kids, because the lighter being produces a lighter child. So they won't have the problems of the world of having a child and their dark-skinned child. These grandmothers, everyone, these are recent things that have happened. And that's why that still goes on today.
Thank you.
I hear you. And I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. What I'm saying, for example, I'm gonna tie this into what you just said. There's a documentary called A Question of Color. And it was done in the early 90s. It was a PBS documentary. If you go to Canopy, you can find it. And there's a sister in there who was on camera, was talking about some guy she was talking to, and talking about how she found out he was from DC, from Washington. She's from Washington. Said, "I'd like to meet your mother." He said, "Oh no, I could never introduce you to my mother." And she said, "Why not?" And he said, "Oh, because you're too dark skinned. My mother told me not to bring nobody dark skinned home." Now, mind you, when you hear that, you would automatically assume that his mother is of a lighter hue. Well, guess what? She's dark skinned herself. And she's encouraging, or rather discouraging her son from bringing somebody home who's dark skinned.
Yep, that's been the programming.
Can I say something when you get a chance? Can I say something?
Yeah, well, we got Cleo, did you want to chime in? Mr. Bedford brought up the thing about the dark-skinned brothers who date dark-skinned sisters who, and I think what I heard you say, Mr. Bedford, is that they're painted with the brushes, though that's not the case.
Here's what I said. I said that what people are not getting is that the ones, and when I say this, let me be clear. I'm not saying that you don't have dark-skinned black men who have this color preference. What I am saying is the vast majority of light-skinned black men, whether they are mixed parentage or not, are not checking for dark-skinned sisters. The irony is black men who are of a darker hue get the brunt of attacks. You'll be led to believe that every time you turn around, it's somebody who looks like Morris Chestnut with somebody who looks like Angela Rye. Well, the fact of the matter is, if the dude looks like Smokey Robinson, I'm telling you, he's not checking for somebody who looks like Vanessa Bell Calloway. Now, Cleo has this perplexed look on your face. Am I making sense?
Yeah, well, that wasn't my experience. I can tell you, it seemed that light-skinned men were always attracted to me as a dark-skinned woman. But go ahead, Cleo, you speak to that.
Well, the face I was making was because I'm listening intently. That's what that was. That's all that was. And I came in on the back end of the discussion, got interrupted by a computer with a mind of its own. But the bottom line is, we're having this conversation about light skin, dark, blah, 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 because of racism, white supremacy, interruption of our common sense. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to the continent, which I've been to many, many times and getting ready to go back probably because I go so much, we naturally come in great shades, gradations, naturally. But we don't make a big deal out of it until we are contaminated by the demonic impact of white supremacy coercion into our psyche. As a matter of fact, in Africa, there's almost, in most cases, now unless you go to the most colonized places, there's no such thing as a black person. They don't even use it to call themselves black. That's something that's done in the presence of people who are called white, who need to create an artificial hierarchy to put them on top. So the bottom line is that we having this ridiculous conversation based on pigment because of interference of our mental health based on by white folks. Because I used to do couples counseling. I stopped. I did it for years. I stopped recently because I don't have time for it. But I have interviewed all kinds of couples, including Black couples, including white couples, including Asian couples, including interracial couples. I've seen it all. And Black people have been made into survivors instead of thrivers. And we're surviving inside of a white supremacy-induced trauma trance. We're not fully operating with all our cylinders because they have been impacted by unresolved racism. As I said earlier in this conversation, most of our children from the late 30s to right now choose the white doll. And these are babies. So they're not in corporate America seeing the so-called female bulldogs that somebody referenced earlier. They don't even see that yet. But they're 3 and 4 and 5 years old and giving white people positive attributes and Black people negative attributes. They're saying the white children are fair and nice, which is ironic as hell, but that's what they think. And even the word fair is a problem because the word fair implies that they're fair and that we're unfair.
Yes.
Words matter. And I don't call white folks or people who are lighter than me fair because they're no more fair than I am. But I'm talking to you about this because of language. But these babies say, well, the Black people are bad. There's been several studies, and you've heard about these studies by now, I'm sure, where
dog test. That's the dog test.
Yeah. There's other tests too. There's been a test where a boy was fixing his bike that was Black, and people who studied looking at it thought he was stealing a bike. A white boy was working on the bike who was indeed a thief, and it never crossed their mind that he was a thief. Back in the day, what's her name? This Asian anchor woman, I forgot her name, Connie Chung.
Yeah.
Connie Chung did a study in Los Angeles where they had a Black man with all kinds of degrees and very professionally accomplished drive a late model Mercedes through Beverly Hills. They had a white man who had a record drive the same car through Beverly Hills, and he was never pulled over once. And the Black man who owned the car, who could afford the car, was pulled over. So this is the same society where this is going on, where we are saying, act your age, not your color. I've heard a very famous minister once say, and I got to use this terminology because this is how they said it, once say something about niggas and flies. Anybody ever heard that before?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Niggas and flies I do despise.
I do despise.
No other children in this country hear such viciously anti-them epithets while having lunch, while playing on the playground, while going to a holiday event. There's the perpetual implication that something is wrong with being Black. So no wonder a Black female may have an attitude sometimes. No wonder a Black male may act out because they're frustrated and society does not give them their own community, their own family does not provide safe space for them to express how they feel. I'll give you an example, which some of you have heard before because you heard the previous story that I told about my experience at Brown University. When Dylan Roof shot those 12 people and 9 died. Dylan Roof. I happened to be traveling across the country the following week to a few mental health conferences that I was a speaker at across the country. And I asked these predominantly Black audiences full of professionally trained mental health professionals, had they took their child aside and debriefed with them and asked them how they felt about that situation. And the majority of these professionally trained mental health professionals did not say anything to their children. And some of the children in the audience who heard the question started crying, particularly the males. So they're walking around with this stuff inside of them that we're so busy not wanting to offend white people who aren't even there, that we're not giving our children permission to breathe. and to rationally engage race-related frustrations in the United States of America, so they implode. And then they're called bulldogs for imploding. I'm trying to get you to understand the importance of being an intentional Black person, because Asians are intentional. That's why it don't matter what's on TV. And we used to be intentional, but we were, listen closely, and if you disagree with anything I'm saying, please say so, I want to engage you. But we were intentional back in the day under a white God. We might have been running things in Black Wall Street, but we still weren't Jesus. And because we weren't Jesus, and we didn't look like Jesus, we didn't have enough clarity to make sure we had a military force in place to defend ourselves from these people in case they came.
What?
So
well,
when they came,
Dr.
we weren't prepared to defend ourselves. What was that?
No. Hold up. Who was that speaking? Ms. Jones? Yeah, I want to hear from you, but we've got Miss McCarter. Is that, I don't know if that's Lika McCarter? Your hand has been up for a very, very long time. Did you want to still speak?
It's Ika. It's
Hi,
IIKA. Hi, I'm new to the platform and I'm very enlightened by what I've heard today. I'm from Mississippi and I have a 16-year-old son on many occasions who has told me that he is not interested necessarily in when he starts to date and dating a Black girl because they're toxic. So the question that has come up several times about Black men and white women and dating outside of your race has intrigued me. And that's why my hand has been up so long, because I wanted to get that in as to what you say, because I've said to him, you better not bring them home. And so before you do that, I better see because I'm a very chocolate Black woman who growing up had problems, with people always bringing up my color, my skin complexion, and who hated what I looked like for many years and was told, oh, you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl. And so, and I still hear that from time to time now, and I'm 50 years old. So how do I talk to my 16-year-old son who, and I'll just put this out there, he does attend a predominantly white school, simply because our public school that is in the area that we live in is not up to standards, it's not up to par. It is in the county. And everybody knows it. So the only other choice was to put him in a private school. But all of his friends, when he's in the community and when he is hanging out, are all Black. He does not hang out with white kids, but he said that when he starts to date, why can't I date a white girl? And the girls that he genuinely talks to from time to time and may be interested in now are fair-skinned girls. They don't look like me. And he told me one time, he said, Mom, you're beautiful. He said, but they don't make women like you anymore. I don't know where he gets this from at 16. So that was my statement, my question. What do I say to him?
Very good question. Cleo, did you want to answer her? Did you want to take a few others to see?
No. I want to answer that.
Go ahead.
I want to answer that.
Go ahead.
Sister,
Ms. Jones, you're next, but go ahead, Cleo.
I love your name. It's very beautiful, Ike.
Thank you.
First of all, sister, ooh, I got chills. And that shows you just how unburnt out I am, because I've been hearing that same line for 40 years and I still get chills because it's so ironic and it's so problematic. It's going to get worse if we don't intervene. You have to breathe and make sure that you have the capacity to be in a good mood, however that occurs, and prepare to have a loving conversation with your son. When you say don't bring him here, I understand that sentiment and I don't disagree with that sentiment, but that sentiment is not transformative.
Sure.
He'll just feel punished and go be with Biff or Brittany, whatever their name is, someplace else.
Right.
And not bring them home. And we got to look at language. As I said before, we can't even be calling them fair skinned.
Correct.
They're not fair skinned. And if you look at them literally, historically, they're definitely not fair skinned. So we got to watch how we talk and what we put into our child, inadvertently put into our child's minds. We have to make our children, through a loving approach, not an aggressive approach, critical thinkers. We have to make them understand cause and effect. For example, you mentioned a moment ago that the school near you is not in good shape. Well, the school near you is not in good shape just because they're Black. The school near you is not in good shape because of white supremacy, mythology, racism, and a certain level of underlining and not properly funding these schools. So your child has to have a critical analysis on what the world they live in and understand that it's not an issue of that they don't make women like you anymore. The issue is that women like you almost never featured in media. I was watching some show last night. I forgot it, but it could have been any show. And the Black woman had an attitude in the movie, and neck going and smacking. And my mother wasn't like that, and I have a sister that's like that. But my point is that Black women are way more diverse than how they're shown on television. And when they are shown to be nice and kind, they chasing Biff, a white man. So if you properly engage your child, and I'll help with this, write me, I'm serious, I'll help you if I can. You gotta give these children a critical analysis about the society they live in, the inequities, the biases, how the media is problematic. For example, ask your child, and I do this all the time, to find an example right now in his mind of a Black on Black love story on television. Now, if he digs hard enough, he might come up with Queen Sugar. But the fact that there's 5 gazillion white shows showing white love, or a show like Scandal that will show a sister chasing white men like crap and never hardly see Black on Black love, he needs to know that that's not a reflection of his inferiority. That's a reflection of this society's corruption and racism. So he needs to know that he's being brainwashed. He needs to know that women like you rarely get any TV coverage because of racism. And I bet you anything, at his school, there's a kind, loving, and put it in quotes to make a point, so-called bulldog Black woman that if she's particularly dark, he won't even see her. Not only will he not see her, he'll project a bulldog projection onto her because of how he's been trained to have, the impulse he's trained to have when he even looks at a Black woman, because he's being trained. And not only that, why a white woman? There's Latinos. Not that I want Black people to go with Latino. I want to focus on why we keep going to white.
Right.
There's Jamaican. There's all kinds of Black women and Black people. But we keep going to white because we've been brainwashed. So somehow this young man needs to understand that he's fallen for the okie doke. I might have told you all about this young man that I met on there's this train that goes the PATH train that goes from Manhattan to New Jersey. And it was his brother on the train who recognized me, wanted to talk with me. And somehow in the conversation, he started talk about white women and how much he liked to F white women. Yeah. And he claimed that he was getting back at white men by effing white women. And he thought because people can be very subjective. He thought because people could be very subjective that I was going to high five and yeah, man. Yeah. I said, wait. I said, if you really want to get revenge on white men, love a Black woman and have some Black children who love themselves. That's revenge. If you really claim that's important to you and that's what you want to do, well, that's the best way to do that is to love a Black woman and make sure your children love themselves. That's the best vengeance. Not giving white women Black penis. That's rewarding them. You're rewarding white supremacy when you give yourself to a white woman. And he was talking all loud, and the train was loud, so I had to speak, at a regular volume. And he was looking around, but it was his fault because he was talking at me at a regular volume, and he was talking to stuff about praising his excuse for running behind white women. But getting back to Ika and your son, just saying to your son, "Don't bring him here," makes you look like the toxic women that he's talking about. You got to give him context. You have to educate him. You have to let him know that he lives in a society, and you can show proof and evidence, historical proof and contemporary proof, that he lives in a society that's biased, that's full of anti-Blackness, and that turns Black people against each other, and that he might consider not falling for it.
And I have had a little more in-depth conversation. Of course, that was my knee-jerk reaction. I say that because I think of how I grew up and how I felt about myself. And my first thing was, why wouldn't you want a woman that looked like me? But he said it. There are a lot of toxic Black girls that I deal with. They have a problem, all this kind of stuff. But I have had more in-depth conversation, but it was just funny to me that it came up in this conversation. And I want to go further with him in this. So I appreciate the conversation.
No problem. And I want you to ask him a question when you feel comfortable, is what's the difference between, and this is not a rhetorical question, it's a real question. What's the difference between somebody who's straight up and somebody who's passive aggressive?
All right.
You understand that question?
Define straight up.
Somebody who's direct and says what they feel like a Black woman supposedly do, or a white woman who's passive aggressive and who winds up doing to you what happened to Jonathan and what's happened to a whole lot of Black men.
Mm-hmm.
It happened to a Black woman named Halle Berry.
Mm-hmm.
Halle Berry was running behind white men. She's with her brother now, and she's been with her brother for a while. But for a minute there, she was running behind white men with all these excuses. And then one of the father of her child called her the N-word. So white women are not necessarily green grass. There's a lot of divorces among interracial relationships. So they're not some green grass perfect scenario. But the bottom line is, before Black children get a chance to even think about marriage, many of them have already been trained to choose the white doll.
Exactly.
Now, somebody just said she had been abused by some brothers as well. How didn't just run behind white men?
Yes,
Okay.
Brother Cleo, it is Adjua. We go way back. Yes, I said that in the chat. She had an issue that nobody really talked about with Wesley Snipes and abuse. And so it wasn't just that. There were some examples. I think the challenge that we have is the toxicity that we tend to run to. When you talk about all these shows, there's a number of good shows that show Black love. It may be some comedy, dramedy. There's a few shows on Netflix that I've watched, from the Upshaws to All in this Black family show that one of the twins, Tamara, one of those are on. So there's a few shows that you can watch, but people tend to at first, when we had Tyler Perry producing his shows, it was family with a message or some issue with a message. Now, if you turn to Ruthless or some of these other shows, you don't know what the message is behind it. And it has gone to a very dark side. But I think, I heard you mention a few things, and maybe I'm just grateful for the parents that I had and how they brought me up. And I was one of the class of first students at Marcus Garvey. So, we had rich history and understanding of who we are and where we came from Dr. Palmer and Mrs. Campbell, who ran that school back in the 70s. But I think I'm challenged that I'm hopeful that this is the beginning of more dialogue, because what we don't get to talk about is our toxic nature in our community on both sides. But we don't get to talk about, which I see and look at all the time, are how many Black women are being killed by Black men daily. It's minute by minute, hour by hour in these relationships. How we have not been taught, you're right, we haven't been taught Black love. So now we have a group of folks that cannot take rejection. And so when the relationship is over, people don't know how to part ways. You're right, we weren't really taught about the trauma that our elders experienced that might have led them to have those conversations about date somebody who is lighter because of their experience. Even the way in which we're talking about with Black women, I'm glad you raised how you introduced the conversation with white folks. Because when I do it around Black maternal health and racism, I call it out. And I tell people, I'm not about to deal with white fragility because nobody has dealt with Black fragility all the time that we've been here. And until we can get on that conversation about how fragile we've been, but we've never really expressed it enough, or we've never had the ability. And so that may be a lot of the reasons why our replies are such. I don't even talk about, I didn't see brothers get in arm and march on for us when Charles Barkley was saying he didn't date Black women because they stank. Now, everybody, loved him because he was this ball player, but I thought that was the most ignorant thing I could ever hear a Black man say coming from a Black woman. And so I think that this dialogue, we have to really keep going and have a little bit more understanding so that we can teach and train our children that you're not going to get that much better by going to a white man, woman, Asian, whatever, because all folks have some bit of toxicity in them. And I've seen all of them act wild and crazy too in their language and behavior. So I just wanted to share that and look forward to more of the conversation. Great to see you. Thanks, Helen, for the invite.
Thank you. Please come again. Please come again. So we have a few other hands. I didn't know if you want to touch that one, Cleo, or.
Yes, I want to respond to that and tell Joa, good to see you, sister, and thank you for your comments. She mentioned white fragility and that there's Black fragility. I want to do a dichotomy comparison. White fragility is different from so-called Black fragility. Black people have been fragilized, if you will, through racism. We can talk about why white people do what they do whenever you want to, one Sunday, one Saturday, whenever that is, but Black people are under attack. Monstrous, relentless, dehumanizing attack. So we've been fragilized. Is that we're not particularly fragile, which is why we made the best slaves, is why they keep fragilizing us. So there's a difference between Black fragilization and white fragility. I just want to make that clear. Also, I want Claudette Berry to know that I saw your comments, and I agree with you that we need to start building schools and family reunions and opportunities to engage each other on these issues and start another epidemic of Black healing and restoration among Black people. But something you said, Ms. Jones, that really hit me. You mentioned that Black men are killing Black women. I want people to listen to me closely and disagree openly in case you disagree. I used to work in law enforcement, and I used to be a hardcore reviewer of FBI surveillance reports and what people are doing to each other in this country. Before my computer decided to reboot itself, I was talking about racialization. And I was talking about, I won't repeat the story, but I talked about the Brown University exercise I did with the white folks stand up and the Black people sitting down, et cetera, to show Black people an example of what it looks like to dehumanize yourself being off limits. No way. No matter how mad white people make each other, including if they are the victim of serial killing, they don't even look at it as what white people do. They look at it what that serial killer did. Not, oh my God, white men are gonna come kill us. But you have Black people who will say, Black men are killing us. Well, we gotta stop saying stuff like that, particularly around children, because Black men are not killing Black women. Black individuals who got issues are killing people. The Black men are not doing that. I've never killed anybody. And most of the Black men that you ran into haven't and never will. So we have to start getting outside of this racialization tendency that we have in terms of saying what Black people do. because that's a side effect of white supremacy mythology too. That I was telling Helen the other day that I was on a talk show recently, and there was a Black woman on the show who said she's tired of blood. She said I'm tired of y'all killing me, and she pointed at me. I had to let her know, I haven't killed anybody. And most of the Black men I know aren't killing anybody. And most Black men aren't killing anybody. So don't accuse me of something that I didn't do. Now, the other point I made that I'm going to make now is that if you look at FBI surveillance reports, white women are being killed left and right in this country. And thrown in forests and in the ocean and all kinds of stuff. But you are not going to hear no white woman say, white men do blah, 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 blah. Not only that, even after a white man brags about grabbing their pussy, they still gonna come together and put him in the White House. Most of the people that put him in the White House were white women.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that the way we see things, the way we say things, the way we behave, our impulses and our conscious and unconscious minds are perpetually contaminated with white supremacy trauma that has us being anti-Black unconsciously and doing things that turns us on each other and have us being bulldogs toward each other.
Well, let me be clear and say, since I'm amongst my own, I made the reference of us killing each other. Now, I'm not gonna have that conversation with them. I'm amongst my own folks. But, and I'll give you that example because when we're talking about, people will put out the reference that more pregnant women, Black women are dying in homicide. Well, I don't want that reference because that is not the issue of maternal deaths as what we're looking at. Yes, that's homicidal issues in regards to relationships. So that's different than putting that on the Black maternal mortality rate or morbidity for what I'm sharing. But yes, I agree with you. You are correct.
One thing that I think we should look at in research, please research everything I say. I invite that. I invite, if you see something different, that you tell me and bring it to my attention. But Black communities used to be the safest places in this country for Black people. There's a film that was done that white folks have purposely marginalized called Made in America, Crips and Bloods.
Oh, yeah.
Crips and Bloods Made in America. And that film was made where I'm from, which is South Central Los Angeles, Compton, Watts. And that film talked about how little Black boys went from, cute kids playing with each other, trying to be happy in life, to gang members who started to shoot and kill each other. It talks about what happened and why there was a transformation. And of course, it was a result of two things. One was discrimination against Black boys, police brutality, and the trauma that it caused that was horrifying Black boys, and wasn't nobody saying nothing. They were giving it all to Jesus, who was white, instead of dealing with it. And it snowballed until what we're going through now. And these boys were not made safe because you don't want to offend white people, even if they're not around. Back in the day, when people knew who O.J. Simpson or who Kato Kalin was, I used to call it Kato Kalin-itis. Have a Black man living in our minds rent-free and will not evict him. And my goal is that you evict both him and her, because it was a Katie Kalin too, metaphorically speaking. Stop tiptoeing around being Black, because when you do that, you wound up acting out on Black people. Another story that I've told to make my point was, and you might have heard this story, is when Donovan Jackson, this young man in Inglewood, you can look him up now, Donovan is spelled as it sounds, D-O-N-A-V-A-N Jackson, was accosted by the policemen in Inglewood because they were harassing his father, little kid, only 14 years old, screaming at the cops, "Leave my daddy alone." And they went and snatched him out the car and threw him on the front of the car, on the hood. And it was a long story, but the bottom line was, just like with Dylan Roof, just like with a lot of Black tragedies that we see in the media, Black parents are not sitting their children aside to talk to them about it and get their opinion and let them say how they feel and give them permission to have an analysis about these things. They're repressed and they're frustrated, so they become bulldogs and run behind the bulldog creators to marry. I'm a white folks. And what happened with Jonathan, whatever his name is, Jonathan Clark, what was his name? I forgot his name. That happens all. Look, that's why I said earlier.
Jonathan Majors.
Yeah, Jonathan Majors. I have counseled all kinds of couples, all kinds, and the bottom line, which Ike's son need to know, is that white people be playing Black people. You think that it's a coincidence simply that Black people are making these decisions when they're actors and when they're football players, et cetera, and with these white girls? What you may or may not know is that that woman, I forgot her name, the one that OJ is accused of killing, what was her name? Simpson something?
Nicole Brown.
Nicole Simpson. And this is a point I'm trying to make in terms of what some of these white girls will do. When OJ Simpson was married to Margarita, she used to go into their front yard and do somersaults and pose and be flirtatious to him while he was married.
Yes.
Okay? And these Black men who have been conditioned to think that white women are not bulldogs and are damsel in distress, or beautiful Snow White, Seven Doors, all that kind of crap, with no pushback or no critical analysis, are picking the white doll, and they're at high risk to pick the white doll because these white girls will target them.
Yeah. I put in the chat earlier about African guy. I'll look for it and replace it again. He, just like this brother, Jonathan Majors, had called the cops on his white girlfriend. Excuse me, but his white girlfriend actually killed him. And and when they came, he was arrested. I mean, she was arrested, but let go. But as it turns out, she had been abusing him. But this is an African man who spoke very horribly about Black women, thought just the bottom of the dirt or whatever. And here this white girl is ultimately who killed him. It was caught on video in an elevator or something. So yeah, and Jonathan Majors, for those of you who don't know, his career, I call it the Cosby effect, because he's getting it. One white woman, he calls a cop on a white woman, the cops come and arrest him, and now he is losing everything. And she's admitted that she lied. There's even some reports that say that the cops told her to say that he abused her. So here we are again, same story. This is the story that we've heard since the beginning of time. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry, Cleo.
No, don't be sorry. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. Somebody's trying to say, was that you, Daryl?
That is Daryl. I keep muting Daryl, y'all, but he just
you
keeps
mute
on
me.
muting himself. Because I keep getting these. Can you please mute Daryl? I have muted Daryl. Daryl wants to
Joe, we gotta be.
But we also have Vincent Palazzo, who has not spoken. I want to hear from him. And I see Simon Netta is up there. Daryl, real quick, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to congratulate all you guys, because all these points are real reliable and valuable, I think, to the Black community, and keep getting the message out. And one thing I wanted to touch on is Charles Barkley. These are house ends, and I call him Harriet Tubman End, because Harriet would have got rid of him. These guys are dangerous to us, man. I mean, really. I mean, I'm with them. They make money, but when you talk against your race, that really bothers me. And they're well outspoken, and Shaq. I just look at them and say, man, these guys, they could do a lot for me, but instead they have to cater to Mr. What do you call him, Mr. Whatever you want to call him, but you know what I'm talking about.
Mr. Charlie.
Yeah, but
Mr. Charlie.
Mr. Charlie. Yeah, there you go, Mr. Charlie. And
But Daryl, let me mention something real quick. This is why and I'm sorry to interrupt that. I got to make this point because you inspired it. And this is what I mean by we have to have a critical analysis. We have to have our children have a critical analysis so they can identify and decode the agenda. The reason we know that Charles Barkley exists is because white people make sure he's the one who gets the microphone.
That's right. Yep.
There's all kinds of people that can speak, that are more articulate, that can break issues down. Every time there's an election, they go and get Lil Wayne. Why is Lil Wayne being asked anything about the political backdrop? They don't go get Jackie Chan or Ozzy Osbourne to speak for white folks during an election. Why we got to hear from Cardi B? We got to understand this is why we got to tell our children in some kind of way that keeps them relaxed and confident that you do not live in a neutral culture. You live in a biased culture that's full of white supremacist tactics. So we can't keep letting our children go into this society like deer in the headlights. We know who Charles Barkley is because they chose him. I'm a person who can articulate issues that are relevant for being a pundit on television. I've done it on rolling shows and things like that, but there's all kinds of shows that won't have me on because I'm not Candace Owens and I'm not Charles Barkley. But Charles Barkley and Gayle King aren't even journalists.
Oh no, man.
Why are we hearing from them? Because they're good enough for the white job.
That's right.
So we got to start, when we critique Black people getting on our nerves, in almost every case, we have to put it in context. For example, when and some of you heard me say this before, when Joe Biden let us know he was going to pick a Black woman, I knew he was going to pick who I call Obama. I call her Kamala. I call her Obama. I knew who he was going to pick. And when they pitched Natanji for the Supreme Court, they picked just like they did with Kamala, a Black woman with a white partner.
Yeah,
they are making these choices. We're not making these choices. There's no such thing as a Black person who gets the green light what occurs in mainstream media. Everybody is white. So when we get mad at Black people like Charles Barkley and blah, 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 understand that they are decoys and they're chosen by white people as part of their strategy to keep us psychically unstable, looking at each other sideways. I was talking to somebody the other day who will remain nameless, who talked about, and this is part of their strategy, how Black people in Africa enslaved Africans. I am a scholar on the slavery experience, and it's not that simple. But that's part of the narrative that's in our psyche that gives us unconscious excuses. Y'all in Africa all the way up. We just ain't shit nowhere. And speaking of that term, ain't shit, there's a phrase that a lot of children heard. I've really surveyed this, niggas ain't shit. Anybody ever heard that phrase before? Most of our Black children have, but Asians don't hear no equivalent term. Nobody else hears that term. Ava Chapman said they had never heard the term niggas ain't shit. Well, I bet you most of the people here have.
Absolutely.
That's right. I have never heard that term.
Absolutely.
Where I'm from, Black parents don't raise their children with that type of talk.
Well, those children are lucky.
You would hear it in the street. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. They would hear it in the street. They'll hear it at school.
Right. My mother never used that term. It was never used in my family by her
Not
friends.
in the small town that I grew up in. They didn't.
Right.
Black people
Well, my
still
mama
so
used
much
it.
segregated.
I ain't gonna lie, my mama used
in rural
it. My daddy
Georgia.
too. Yeah.
And
my mother did
we
too.
went to church. We
And my
played
grandmother.
They played, sports, but I guess we weren't really that interwoven with the white people because we were more segregated in rural Georgia. But no, we didn't hear that. And yes, Black men do marry Black women where I'm from.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have different shades of people in our family where I'm from. And I've never seen a mother treat a dark-skinned child different from the light-skinned child that's in the family. And when you talk about gangs, we didn't grow up around gangs. So to us, we still had that mentality of Dr. Martin Luther King. He was from Georgia. And a community, rural Georgia, they had farms. The Black people had farms. No children went hungry. we had nutritious organic foods. If a mother, if you needed some food, okay, go down there and pick a bushel of peas. You can go to the cornfield and pick some roasting ears. You see, so people would kill a hog and have a barbecue every September, 1 or 2 hogs. And everybody in the community, they still do that with the Black cowboys, the saddle clubs, the Black saddle clubs around here. They still do that every March and October. So it depends on where you're from, I think. Okay, so because when I was stationed, when I lived in DC, I remember going through a cultural shock coming from rural Georgia and going to DC. We still wear our hair short and natural, Black women, and I am a dark-skinned woman. In DC at the time, they were wearing these different color weaves. And the things they would say, like, oh, you know, I have my uniform on, you know, professional. Why do you wear your hair like that? And I'm like, huh? I remember getting the best compliments when I wore my hair short and natural. And I'm talking about way back in the early, in 1990. I got the most compliments from white men. The Black men, even then, they look at Black women, and, hey, it was a culture shock. Even when me and my husband moved to Marietta or Atlanta area in later years, and that was in the early 2000s, it still was somewhat of a culture shock because gangs were coming to the area then. Where I'm from, Black cowboys, horseback riding, motorcycles, gardens. I mean, and then you have to get out. And I have 2 Black sons, and I actually moved from Atlanta area back to rural Georgia to finish raising them because the gangs were coming there then. And we didn't understand it. I remember a whole Black subdivision of nice houses. These people moved out of the subdivision, Black people in nice homes, because somebody's auntie brought their nephew in from Los Angeles. And and there were other churches bringing young Black men from Chicago, New York to get them away from the gangs, but the different gangs were coming and they started tagging the houses. And all these Black people abandoned their nice neighborhood because they're like, oh no, we'll just let the mortgage go into foreclosure before we live around this, you see. Now we come back to the rural Georgia. I'm gonna stop talking because I'm sitting here listening, and what I'm not hearing is that all Black people, American descendants of slavery, are not the same. We're not. So I understand and I can respect somebody else's perspective, okay? But to just leave out a whole set of Black people who don't live that way, okay? And one last thing, what I don't understand and what I'm not hearing is, what's the solution? If you know what the society has for your children and it's not good, why are you still living in it? What's wrong with getting off to yourself and developing your own, say, another Black Wall Street? You have the talent, you have the education, and you have the knowledge. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chapman.
Thanks
Thank you, Eva.
for sharing your experience, bringing that diversity to the table. Thank you so much.
That's true.
I want to respond to that. First of all, I've been talking about strategic solutions all since I've been here.
Yes, you have.
I mean, nonstop. So I want to emphasize that has occurred. Also, I do know that the United States and the Western world is a huge landmass with all kinds of things happening. The purpose of this conversation is to look at what is splitting us, what is causing conflict between us. Now, clearly, all Black people are not in conflict. However, I went to the Whole Foods in Atlanta last year, and every Black man in that Whole Foods in Atlanta had a white woman, every one of them. I went to a mushroom pizza called Something Mushroom in Greensboro, North Carolina. Same thing. The sisters were walking in there by themselves, and most of the brothers came in with white girls. So the phenomena that I'm describing, which has also been encapsulated in most of the children tested choosing a white doll, is a phenomena that has not been resolved. So it's really a good idea, sister, to do what you did, to raise examples of Black people working together more, Black people being more supportive of each other. I mean, when I was little, for example, if somebody couldn't pay their rent, we had rent parties. And we made sure that that person's rent was paid. We didn't tease them for being poor and call them names, and we helped them. But things have changed because there's been a perpetual attack on Blackness that we have not intervened on. And we have been trained to pray away everything instead of actively dealing with it. To give it over to God. We've been praying, we've been a white Jesus in that, and we've been prayed to tiptoe instead of being strong people with self-respect. So those communities that you just described, the cowboys, et cetera, is a shrinking community. And I'm glad you have that place to go back to. But my parents are from Jackson, Mississippi. And I remember going to Jackson, Mississippi as a child and literally feeling I was in heaven. You know, no ma'am, yes ma'am. The children were extremely respectful. They were very kind. And one of the favorite things I did in my life as a child, because I was from the West Coast, from Los Angeles, was go to the South to see my family in the South because they were so loving. But I went back there relatively recently. It ain't the same no more, because the attack on the Black psyche is no joke. It's real. And there's been very little intentional resistance to the attack on Black people. For example, all of this biracialism, showing Black men and Black women almost only with white people. There's not been an outcry about that on a national level about what y'all doing. Wait a minute, what about Black on Black love? We haven't been in the streets against that because we don't want to offend white people.
Yep.
I've had famous people, I might have told this last time I spoke to you, I was a very famous Black woman who called me because her child who went to private school, a Black child with a Black father, they were divorced, but the child still had Black parents, went to a private school, and on the campus, some white kids called her that word. And she called me and said she didn't know what to do. This is a brilliant woman. And I said, what you mean you don't know what to do? Well, I don't want my child to be angry. And I said, do you prevent her from seeing when you're angry at her father, when he pisses you off? And when he makes you mad, do you make sure she don't see that anger? When you say you don't want your child to be angry, you don't want them to be angry at who? And to make a long story short, she finally had to admit she was protecting white folks. She didn't realize it, she didn't know it.
Yeah.
When she said, I don't want them to be angry, and she had never thought about it or broke it down in terms of angry at who. And I said, I'm not interested in you simply being angry at white people or whatever. I'm interested in your child feeling courageous enough to defend herself and have a mother who knows how to talk frankly and lovingly to her about this issue. As brilliant as you are, you called me talking about you don't know what to do. Because what she mean was, I don't know how to tell the truth to my child without making her angry at white folks. One more story to make my point. I was at a mall near Baltimore, the Anne Arundel Mall, and these two young same-gender loving gentlemen saw me, and I'm abbreviating the story to make my point. They ran to me and they said, "You that guy that don't like white people? You know, you got to stop that. We can't be racist. You don't like white people." And I asked them, I said, have you ever ran up to somebody and confronted them for not liking Black people? Have you ever confronted somebody in their tracks at a public mall upset about them not liking Black people? Silence. I said, so why are you? I said, I don't hate nobody. So I'll just say that to you. I hate the myth of white supremacy and its impact on Black people, but I don't have an hate speech. I don't do hate speech. I'm not doing hate, but y'all think if it's pro-Black, it's anti-white. And the opposite of pro-Black is anti-Black. And there's no concern about that phenomenon, not even among y'all. Because I said, I already asked you, have you ever ran to somebody's face and interrupted their steps in a public place to say, stop being angry at Black people? I bet you never have. And they looked sideways at each other because they had never been upset about anger toward Black people. They worried about white folks.
Yeah.
And these were young people. They were like in their 20s, and this was recent.
Yep.
So as long as we are whispering white and long as we are tiptoeing all of their agendas, including their agenda to split Black people or Black men from Black women, and advertise in corporate promotion, TV, every other kind of media situation that your love interest should be somebody white. That's the best thing for you. Long as our children are watching the television without a critical analysis of the bias or a critical recognition of a bias that they're looking at while they're enjoying popcorn and watching TV, they're gonna have anti-Black impulses. Sometimes even if they marry somebody Black, because some of us only marry Black. That's not true for all of us. So please don't get demoralized by this. But it's because it's gonna be painful to hear. Some of us marry Black people because we don't feel worthy of white people. So we settle for somebody Black.
Wow.
So we need to wake up and smell the coffee, the Black coffee.
Yeah.
So
Because we're being trained to hate our own guts.
we're running.
Helen?
We're really running long on time. So very quickly, if this is okay with you, Cleo, I'm going to ask the next few people to pose whatever their question. Let me do 3 at a time, and then you can take them, and then we'll do the last 3. And please, nobody else raise your hand. We got to get off this call. I appreciate. I appreciate that. We have this all the time. You know, these conversations are so necessary that once we start them, they start going. But
I know.
I appreciate Cleo. I don't want to take up all the time. So let me do this. Vincent Colazzo, please, you go next. Simonetta after that. And who did I put in the chats? I forget. So Vincent, you go, Simonetta go, and then I think Miss Gloria, you're next. And then we'll take the last 3, which is Miss Graves, Dr. Jacqueline, and Miss Bay. And Demetrius, you had your hand up. I don't know if you're still wanting to speak, but anyway, go ahead, Vincent Colazzo, please.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good day, everybody. My name is Vince Colosso. I remember years ago when I was first on Facebook back in 2008 or 9, and a friend of mine said that another Black History Month coming, and nothing's happened. And he and we went to school together. And so I decided to do something about it. So I created a group on Facebook. It still exists. It's called Black History Month, a year-round celebration. I'll put the link in the chat, and you can go there and check it out. Helen, Miss Higgy is part of that group, and that's how we know each other. Dr. Manago, you've been wonderful. You've been spot on and on point on everything. And I totally agree with everything you're saying. I like the fact that we're having these conversations. We do need to heal. To address the point someone made earlier in the chat, that is there a school that Black people have or for Black children? There are schools around the country, and of course they are under attack here and there. I'm here in Chicago, and there are a couple of schools: the Nation of Islam's, Muhammad University, and there are a couple of others. But Dr. Umar Johnson, and some of you are probably familiar with him, the Prince of Pan-Africanism. He has a school. It's called the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey School for Black Boys, and he started it. It's going to open up. He finally got the school because he'd been holding crowdfunding for years, and that was one of the complaints. People were saying, "Where's the school?" Well, the school has been built. He bought a building. The school is ready, and he will start the school in September. So it'll be an all Black boys school. He wants to eventually open up a all Black girls school. We do need to pay attention to our children. That's our next generation. Earlier, it was mentioned about us, about our Black boys not loving our Black girls. And we hear about the divestors as Black women who don't want to be with Black men. The passport bros are the other, is the answer to that situation. They are Black men who are leaving the country to go get a wife from another country. While that's happened throughout years, they're staying in those countries because they feel that if they bring that wife here to America, she will be changed to the American attitude. I'm going to land my plane in a moment. The fact of the matter is, Black people are in the most trouble we've ever been in our history. And I want everybody to recognize that fact. We are in trouble. We have no friends, as the great John Henry Clark said. We have no friends, and we're less of each other's friend than we've ever been. We used to unite and build things. That's why we built Black Wall Street and other little smaller Wall Streets. We used to do that. But we don't do that anymore. And so now, since we have no friends, we know that white people are white people. They're going to be white people. But we also know that immigrants from other races, and even immigrants who are Black like us, they tend to murmur things. Just recently, Puerto Rican gentleman, actor John Leguizamo, he said, you'll love this. He said in an interview, Latinos, we built this country.
Incredible. I heard that.
That's a middle joke.
Okay. Now, first of all, in order to educate our children, we need to let our children know how awesome we are. Okay? We didn't have anybody free us. We freed ourselves. 180,000 Black men joined the Union Army and fought for our freedom. And we got it because the North was losing the war. The North was losing the war. The South was winning. But the North was losing. And so when the 180,000 Black soldiers, you see the movie Glory with Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman, we took our freedom. We fought for our freedom. We got it. We can do that again. You cannot take a people, and I'm landing my plane now. You cannot take a people who for 310 years, you turn them from 1555 to 1865, turn them inside out, upside down, right side up, everything else, and then free them. And then for 90 more years, from 1865 to 1955, intermittently terrorize them and those people be good. We're crazy. I mean, as a result, we are messed up. And so we have to recuperate from this. And unfortunately, we don't have much time because everybody is up against it. So our best friend is each other. And I'm done.
Amen. Okay. Who did I? Simonetta, very quick. I keep saying brief. Go ahead, Cleo. I'm trying to save you, Cleo, but go ahead. I see you dying to say something.
We could talk all day.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Go ahead, Cleo.
Can you guys hear me?
Wait
I'm
a
sorry,
minute.
I'm driving.
Wait a minute,
Oh, sorry.
Simonetta. Wait a minute, Simonetta. Go ahead, Cleo.
Okay.
Another thing that we have to start doing in front of our children is supporting Black people who try to have our back. Listen closely. For example, no matter how you feel about him or think you feel about him, when Ice Cube broke out during the election, he tried to introduce a Black agenda into the conversation. And then he got accused of running behind Trump, which was not true. And people kind of clouded over the fact that Biden and Kamala wouldn't talk with him. And now we don't see him anymore. And they made him a joke. We can't let that happen. We can't let that happen in front of our children. We need to affirm when somebody Black tries to have our back. Like the sister said earlier about the people in Japan, she said, right or wrong, they have their people's back. Now, I'm not really good at having somebody's back who's wrong, particularly when they're anti-Black. But another person who I'm not going to debate about this today, we can debate about this next time, who we allowed to go stone crazy was Kanye West. Kanye West used to kind of be pro-Black like his mother. But he did some things, including, you remember when he said that George Bush didn't like Black folks? You remember that? He did a few things, but what happened to him, which is what happened to Ice Cube, is that nobody had his back. Not only did nobody have his back, the first so-called Black president called him a jackass publicly. So he was hurt by that. So he went running behind Trump, who didn't call him a jackass. Now, I don't agree with running behind Trump. Please don't think that. I'm just talking about cause and effect and the occurrence or the things that occur when somebody steps out for us and we don't step back. We have to support people that step up for us. I have built a center called the Amasi Center for Black Women and Culture, starting in the late 90s, the late 80s for Black folks. So they don't have to take this long to build no school. Anybody can do it if they really want to do it. And there is a place called the Amasi Center that's based in Baltimore, Maryland right now. That is an affirmation, restoration, critical thinking and culture affirmation, enhancement, educational culture organization for diverse Black people. We're also going to be sponsoring retreats, weekend retreats, to do Black healing restoration work, focus on parents, learning how to be intentional Black parents, teaching Black men and women to heal the divisions and learn how to decode all of these attacks on Black love and Black people so they can deflect them and not let them work, and how to be full-time committed to resolving anti-Blackness and decoding anti-Blackness so we won't fall for it. And one of the things I want to talk about, not today, because there would be no times, more than once, somebody talked about how everything is becoming gay. And how not only are most of the Black people on TV who have a love interest running behind white folks, but if they're not running behind white folks, if they're a man, they're running after their husband, who used to be white too, usually white too, by the way. But anyway, we're gonna have that conversation too, Ms. Higgy, because that's a whole nother bag of whatever you want to put in that bag in terms of something that's causing anxiety among Black people. And Black people are afraid to be critical because they don't want to be called homophobic. Black people are afraid to say what they really feel about so-called transsexuals, et cetera, because they don't want to lose their job and be attacked. So there's a lot of silence happening along those lines. And in the wake of Black people being accused of being particularly so-called homophobic, we need to address that because that issue is causing division too in our community. But I don't know what time is your show end?
Yeah, it's a half hour ago, 40 minutes ago.
Okay.
People have had their hand up, so I just want to very quickly, and I mean it, y'all, we got to be really brief because all of us need to, I'm hungry, Cleo has to go. So Simonetta, I know brevity is not your strong suit, but give it a try very quickly. Simonetta.
Actually, are you going to have a part 2? You may need to have a part 2 of this. Because there's just so much ground to cover. There's so much depth. I don't know how I can be brief, but I thank everybody for what you've added to this conversation. I have a very pessimistic approach. I think if you look at Black people in America in 50 years, we'll be white with a tan because we're 13% of the population. It's just math. 13% of the population, if we're not being extreme and intentional about our own self-preservation, I see us being enveloped and swallowed up by every other group who has the political or economic withhold to practice self-preservation. Because you're looking at someone like Kamala Harris or all these people we're creating with non-Black people. How are you going to tell them not to be with somebody who looks like their father or their mother who is not Black? How are you going to tell them not to? It's a part of who they are. And that's the thing. When somebody wants to hurt you, they hurt you from the heart. They get inside your family. They get inside your sentiments. They know we as Black people, we're not Nazis. We're not going to be out here sterilizing our own children. They know we're not, that's not who we are. We love our children, but these children are going to grow up conflicted in this society that is anti-Black, and they're going to get rewarded for anything that they do that has proximity to being non-Black. And it's just what it is. It's what happened in Argentina. It's what happened in all of Latin America. If you want to see what's going to happen to this country with Black people, study how Afro-Latinos are being treated right now. That's just what I have to say.
Wow.
And we will have a part 2, I promise you, Miss.
Please do. And make sure you invite me in, please.
We gonna get you, Daryl. I'm gonna bring you a muzzle next time we have you. But Cleo, I know you want to speak to that, but I'm gonna tell you not to, so we can keep moving. Who else was up here for a while? Miss Gloria, go ahead real quickly, please.
Thank you so very much, Miss Helen and Cleo. This has been a most educational, enjoyable discussion, and I'm waiting to get all of my questions in on part 2. But being 5 generation Chicago, since 1914, I think I've seen it all. I'm 82, so the discussions on racism and colorism, sexism, interracial relationships, marriages, everything that we've covered today. No one has mentioned the word veteran. I am a veteran, United States Navy neuropsychiatric nurse. And the issues of racism and colorism is rampant in the military. We have veterans at every level, every class, rank, non-commissioned officers. The biggest issues and concerns are the racism and sexual assaults against men and women throughout the military, and the Department of Defense not addressing any of it. I chair and am commander of the National Association for Black Veterans out here in Montgomery County. And my biggest concern is the contractors. We have few, if any, Black contractors throughout the military. Doesn't matter the department or the branch of military, the contractors assault our men and women, our male, female in the military on a daily basis. And it's not being addressed. We have our men and women coming back home. I served during Vietnam era, and we have our men and women coming back tainted, damaged into civilian life, having the most difficult times, whether it's housing, health, education, which they have fought for themselves and for us. And so we have a suicide rate that is at crisis level. And Cleo, I'm sure you can address all of this, and I know we don't have time, but I do want us to, because the mental health and disparities in health with all of the men and women that are coming out of the armed services, it's a problem that is going to affect all of us wherever we live, and our children, because the children of these servicemen and women are being tainted by what their parent has experienced and left the military with. So I don't know if you want to talk on that now or just make a comment on what I had to say, but Miss Helen, I'm hoping that we can raise enough money so that you can keep these conversations going, because Zoom has to be paid for, these lines have to be paid for. But I do want us to be able to address veterans at some point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a call that we will definitely do in the future.
Yeah.
Who else do I have here? Ms. Graves, and we have, and I see your hand, Ms. Bay, but I'm trying to get people who have not spoken. Ms. Graves, very quickly, and then Dr. Baker, very quickly. Ms. Graves, go ahead.
Yes, here, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I just want to say yes, about when the gentleman was talking about how, like, sometimes me being African American woman, sometimes I experience, sometimes the Black men, when they're with a white woman, they be thinking they're like, they got like a princess on their arm. Like you'll go inside the store and they'll just let the door hit you, won't hold the door for you, or look at you like you're nothing. And I don't know, it's sad that, they come from an African American woman, a Black woman rather, but then they act like they're not even Black or something. And my family, we're from Louisiana and whatnot. And when my parents came here in California and everything, they all stick together. Like the gentleman was saying, they help each other with their mortgage and all that. Our family, we all stick together. All my dad brothers, they started from scratch, started their own businesses, doing upholstery, and it went, to other things. But all of his brothers, I think it was like 5 or 6 of them, they all had their own businesses. And when I no education really, but they self-taught themselves, they taught each other, and they would stick together, help each other, one get in a bind with their payments or whatnot, house note, they would loan each other money, would help each other out. And that's how they was able to sustain for 50 years being in business till my dad passed away. And I just think that we need to go back to that. He was saying about the vegetables. My mom, like she still do her own gardening, her own fruits and vegetables. And that's what we're lacking. I think like in an African-American society that we need, back to used to be help each other and stay self-sufficient, not relying on the man. And like myself, I run my own business. I've been in business 25 years. And when my dad died, I ran his for 8 years. Or whatnot. And my dad did teach me to be sustainable, don't rely on the system. And it hasn't been easy up and down, but God has always blessed me and catch me and all that. And so right now, I'm right now the breadwinner of my family. I'm helping all my family members right now because my sister, she's has cancer or whatnot. I'm helping everybody. I built apartments on my property, an apartment at my daughter house, but apartment there. And my mom stayed with an apartment and my sister. That's what we need to do, to be self-sustainable and help each other out. But sometimes, like I experience, sometimes when I deal with some of my people, they get kind of jealousy and hate the hatred of each other. Yeah. And it shouldn't be that way. But that's all I have to say. And I thank you for this program.
Thank you, Ms. Graves. We've definitely thrown out some of our good, we've definitely thrown out some of our good stuff with the bad. And we've got to figure out how do we recapture the very essence of who we are as a people.
Yes.
Very quickly, Reverend Baker, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good. I thank you for inviting me. I don't know how I got into this group, but one of the things that I believe, I am a native Washingtonian. I can date my family back to the 1930s. I know about the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King. DC, for the 1955 babies, we were called civil rights children. The women were trained differently to educate our children. We were called servants of our people, and we still teach about civil rights and things. So I think from a different perspective, I don't know Cleo, there are a group of women who are moving and shaking the pendulum to teach their children about civil rights movement, but based upon the hidden strength of Black women who financially supported not only those movements, but if Black women refuse to support churches and other institutions, there would not be institutions to do the wonderful things to raise men. But I don't want him to respond on it. I mean, if he wants, he could email me, this is an interesting conversation. But I think that we come from where we grew up. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I know politics. we were trained that politics was the realm that we would be movers and shakers. Most of my female friends are movers and shakers still today in major corporate in places. So we sit there as spooks in the room. So this is an interesting conversation for me as a Washingtonian who sees things from a different perspective on how we do things to elevate our children and grandchildren.
Excellent points. We're a regional people, and we all come from different situations, which is great because we're not monolithic. And very, 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 very quickly, Ms. Faye, and you're going to be the last person, then we're going to close it out with Cleo, closing remarks.
Peace and blessings. And I'll be very quick. At the age of 13, I was taken from an inner city housing project and placed in a lily white orphanage in a very rich suburban area right outside of Philadelphia on the main line. This experience caused me to lose my identity, but it also caused me to become a very avid Black revolutionary. I'm saying this to say, when I moved back to this neighborhood in my senior years now, and I'm raising my grandson, he was sent to the neighborhood school, which is a lily white high school. And one of the few African teachers that was, Black teachers that was there was an African man, and he formed a group called Power so that he could bring the handful of Black children together to teach them about themselves. My grandson didn't want to go because he had been accepted so nicely by all of his little white friends, come over to sleepovers, go out to the movies, this, that, and the other. He didn't see any reason, and his white friends would put pressure on him, saying, why do you have to go to an all-Black meeting, all-Black group? And then my grandson started preferring to date little white girls. And I had to explain to him, number one, you want to get someone who looks like your mother or your grandmother. And with all my African centricism and everything in my household, and taking them to African festivals and this, that, and the other, my point is this thing is so darn powerful, okay? And then we have to understand our Black men. Our Black men, after being under so much oppression, they are extremely sensitive to being respected, their status, and how they appear. And so, and this affects my grandson, who is now, like I'm 19 in college, and he kind of like turns a negative eye towards the young Black girls because as Black women, we are sassy, we are outspoken, but everybody needs to understand this is our shield that this society has caused us to create, as well as the Black man, his shield that he has been forced to create. So, but underneath that, we are the most lovingest people. Otherwise, these white folks would not be alive. We are the most lovingest people on the face of the earth. And so I just will end and say that, yes, Helen, you have to have a number 2 and a number 3.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. All right. Well, Cleo's always open to coming back. Cleo. I'm going to give you the last word there. I'm sure you want to wrap all of this up somewhere, and we can talk about when we can do this again and how soon, maybe next month. But go ahead, Cleo.
I really appreciate everything everyone has said. And I can't review all of it because we're getting ready to end, but I remember the final comments that were made by the sister who said that we were some kind people, naturally. And I want to underscore that as somebody who told you about how people were in the South when I was a child, how loving and wonderful the people were. And when I go to the continent, in most parts of Ghana and other places, people are just kind. And there's exceptions to everything, but I'm talking about generally. Most of the time, people are very kind. Even if they're poor, they still want you to eat. You know, our spirits are good, and that's what white supremacy has exploited. With the native people and other people who taught them how to live in the winter, the native people, and who taught them how to survive, but they had an agenda. Regardless of how good the native people were, it was irrelevant to their agenda. Just like when we were enslaved over on the continent, when they started doing trade and they were allowed to sit up shop and even bring their spiritual beliefs to Africa because people felt like, do your thing, do you. But they had an agenda. When they were allowed to go to the universities in Kemet, because the schools like here, you can go to university if you want to, but they had an agenda. And as I told Helen in the previous conversation, when I was an undergrad, I wrote a paper called Breaking Laws of the Human Heart. And that's what white supremacy does. It does stuff that we can't fathom, that we go, what? We so busy going, what? While we're going, what? They go into gear to do their thing. So I do think it's a great idea to underscore the fact that a lot of us in our right minds and in the best conditions are very kind, caring people. And I want to reiterate that, including the people that folks are calling bulldogs and stuff, who are in some instances frustrated and act out their frustration when and the brother or sister who's witnessing it has no context, so they judge them. When I see Black people going through stuff, I always put it in context and I don't judge them. Now, when I get on my last nerves, I keep my distance, but I don't ever act out and re-traumatize Black people. I don't believe in that, and I think we should work on not doing that. Somebody said that we were 13% of the population. Don't believe nothing they say. We might be 25%. I'm not saying we are. I'm saying you cannot believe what they say. You cannot, they're always minimizing us so we can stay in our place. We really don't know what we really don't know what our percentages are. They always define reality, like even going back to this perpetual biracial depiction of Black people in the press. The majority of us are not biracial like that. But if you watch TV and that's your only frame of reference, you might think that because of a social control agenda. I want to advise us all to question everything. Not in some kind of headachy way where you got to be never have any peace. Look, I'm almost 70 years old. I am very peaceful, and I'm very healthy. I'm doing very well because of how I look at the world. I don't avoid things, and I don't get pushed out of shape by what I see. I have an analysis that puts it in context, and I move past my initial trauma into action. And I want us to move past our initial trauma into action, because that's what the Jews and everybody else do. They see something and they call it anti-Semitic, and they get back into action. And their theme is never again, as opposed to when y'all gonna do it again, which wind up being the Black one because we're so traumatized. But we need to talk about never again too. But question everything, even Black Lives Matter. We should have been questioning that. Because the white people let it happen too long, be suspicious. There's something with it that's not cool. Final thing is there needs to be a part 2. I'll do anything for Miss Higgy. All she had to do is ask me, and people used to pay me thousands of dollars to do this. I want you to know that right now.
Yes, I appreciate it. But you know what? Let me say on that note, Cleo is here, but take his information. You all work for organizations, and contract with him to do. And I've some people here today have indicated you need some one-on-one stuff. Like he's in business. He does. I mean, he's committed to us as a community. Yes. But this is his livelihood, and I can't thank him enough for coming here, spending this time with us. And I look forward one day for him to say, you know what, remember that Miss Higgy chick? We need her over here.
Oh, hey, that's coming. But I want to say one more thing, then I'll close up. A sister talked about being from DC, and she talked about teaching people about civil rights. And that's a good thing. But we didn't begin our experience as human beings running from white folks. That should not be our beginning story. The word slave is a derivative of the word Slav, which is a European term because that's where slavery which people get mixed up with servitude, which happened in Africa, not slavery, it was servitude. Slavery came from that context, and we need to know our history and know what's really going on. But the bottom line is, we didn't start as a people fighting for civil rights. I'm gonna have to cuss and make we used to run shit. I could say that poetically with academic finesse. I have to say it like that because, hey, we did not come from having to. We came from greatness that's unparalleled and unimagined in the human story that we know nothing about. And there's a reason why they got Kemetic people or people from the place used to call themselves white, because white people do not want us to associate ourselves with where we really came from. We are amazing. Like I always joke and say, we're so amazing that the Williams sisters have to play each other. They beat the whole world and wasn't nobody left but two sisters.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
That's some black stuff, baby.
We keep mentioning Egypt. Egypt was the first country in Africa that I visited. And I hope that everybody on this call takes an opportunity, finds an opportunity to go see Egypt. You will walk around in absolute amazement. You will walk around in complete affirmation about who you are. They left plenty of signs for us to know that these were in fact Black people. The one I love to tell is going into the museum and seeing, when they raided the tombs, because that's what they did. But they had a wig for every hairstyle Black women have worn: cornrows, afros, dreadlocks. I mean, it's there. When you go into the catacombs and you see the hieroglyphics, they are painted with people, brown people. Why would white people tell a story about themselves with brown people? So, and it's just amazing. I mean, you literally, you go into the pyramids and you descend into the pyramid, which I had no idea, and you get in there, and it's just as, normally if you're in a basement, there's a dingy, none of that. And you just look at the pyramids and you look at all of it, and you're just like, how, and they still don't know how it was done. So we're amazing people, and we have to always keep sight of that. People talk about the chosen people. I'm not a biblical person, but I have to believe that if there are chosen people on this planet, it has got to be Black people, because we've been through so much and we are still here. And we have been a target of demise and erasure for so long, and we are still here. And if we would just believe in ourselves, and if we have differences with one another, we need to figure out how to handle it in a way that we do it in our own circles, right? We look at even what's happening with our brother, Jonathan Majors, Black women, we get mad. We say, well, he wasn't dating Black women anyway, so we don't care. We have to care, because collectively we can't look at who is the accused, because what everybody else sees is that the accused is a Black man. And we see this happening repeatedly, just like with Cosby. Now they're pulling women out of the woodwork to say that this guy who was on top, apparently he was like the top notch, actor that's happening. But we have got to, even if we have issues, we need to be having these conversations amongst ourselves and behind closed doors about ourselves. We're online, this conversation here, it's impossible almost to have private conversations. But we need to be supporting each other. We cannot become the people who are sitting under the tree with the strange fruit hanging over our head, and we're indifferent to it, because that's where we're going. So on that note, I'm going to stop preaching.
And how are we going to get each other back if we diss each other for messing up?
Yeah, gotcha.
I can't tell you how many people that I've counseled who were pro-white, who were anti-Black, who through me being kind to them, shocked them out of their anti-Black. I said, wait a minute, I'm Black. This kindness is coming from a Black source. There's a film, and I'm gonna literally close with this. There's a film starring Denzel Washington. He played a military psychiatrist, and it's an autobiography. And I can't think of the name of it. Maybe the sister has been answering all my questions.
Anton Fisher.
Antoine Fisher.
Yes.
Antoine Fisher. In the film Antoine Fisher, which is a biography, it shows a platonic psychological love story between Denzel Washington's character and a very angry Black man who was going off and angry, but he very lovingly and patiently guides his brother back to his humanity. Because Black love works. Patience and focus and intentionality works. Call somebody an MF and a BMF, or being mad at them for doing something anti-Black, which is what that brother did with, if you will, running behind this white woman. I keep telling people, getting mad at Black people for being anti-Black is like being mad at somebody for limping after a car crash. We've been through an accident. So let's be more compassionate. Let's talk in ways in front of our children that will guide them toward loving somebody like them when they get older, and not choosing the white doll, and stop calling them fair-skinned, and stop unconsciously doing things that create a bridge between Black people instead of toward Black people. It's in our hands. We can do it. I know we can do it. I've done it on my own single-handedly. I'm only one person. That's not enough among 80 million. But I've done what I can, and I got some skills for you. So I look forward to our next conversation. And thank you, Miss Higgy, for inviting me here today. And thank you, Black people, for the conversation and the interaction. I'm highly appreciative. Thank you.
And on that note, I'm going to bring us all on screen so we can do our weekly. For those of you who haven't been here before, we have a way that we sign off. And so just join in. If you go to, and please go to my, if you're a Black woman and you're on this line and you're on Facebook, please join us on When Black Women Gather, only Black women. I know, brothers, you want to hang out with us, but it's our spot only.
I know.
And also, for those of you who are on this call, I will add you to my When Black Women Gather Google group, Black women only. Sorry, guys. I want y'all to start your own. That's why.
Okay.
And there's also my website, whenblackwomengather.org. But one of the things that we say here, and let me say this before we close out, what I say to Young, I was thinking about when Ike, is that her name? Am I saying it right? When she was speaking about her son, I was having dinner with a friend in Durham some years ago, and we had two young Black male waiters, and they were, very excited to talk to us. And one of them was sharing, they were both sharing with us how they don't date Black girls. And these guys were in their 20s, they weren't babies. So they were saying they don't date Black girls. And so, we asked them why. They said they're typical because they're rowdy, they're this, they're that, or whatever. So I said to them, and I say to young Black men all the time, I say, when you look in the mirror, do you like what you see? And I just let them, of course they say, yeah, because they're cute. We know they're cute. We made them, right? So they say, yeah. So then I say to them, I say, but you do know that you can only recreate that with a Black woman. So let me ask you again, when you look in the mirror, do you like what you see? So on that note, I'm going to say, can we all look in the mirror and love what we see? and can we just say that when Black people gather, what happens, everybody?
When Black women gather, amazing things happen.
And thank you for having, yes, right? So thank you for sharing another amazing Sunday, long Sunday. With us.
Before you go, can I ask you a question?
And we will do this again. Let me just end out, and then we can stay on and talk, but I want to stop the recording and let Cleo go. Thank you so much, Cleo. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Cleo.
Thank you, Dr. Manago.
Right on,
Thank
brother.
you.
I need to have a conversation with you. Good.
Okay. All right.
I hope we don't have to wait too long.
We'll get him back. He's really good. He's been really good about